Good evening. I'd like to call to order the July 24th meeting of the Town of Groton Council Committee of the Whole. All councilors are present. Calendar and communications. Councilor Baumgartner.
Good evening. It's been a busy couple weeks here in Groton. I attended the City of Groton ribbon cutting for their waterfront park on Thames Street. If you haven't seen it yet, go check it out. I know a lot of people were able to enjoy that public space during the fireworks. In addition to that, I know that a lot of folks are using our beaches and enjoying town, so keep inviting your friends and family to Groton, and most importantly, enjoy the community you live in. But I believe that is all.
Councilor Parker.
I too was at fireworks, but I also did the lullaby reading at the Groton Public Library on Tuesday night. It was, even though it was raining, it was actually pouring. It turned out to be a nice event. I want to thank the staff there for all their help with it, and I'm glad to be able to read to the little ones. Nikki retired, so went to Nikki's retirement on last Thursday, which was a nicely well turned out event. I stopped at Fort Griswold for a moment for their event that was held the same evening, and I believe that's all I have.
Councilor Franco.
I attended the EDC meeting, and that's about that.
Councilor Heath.
I enjoyed the fireworks from Fort Griswold. Also went to Nikki's retirement party. She was really helpful for me when I came on the council, so just wanted to say thank you to her for everything that she's done. And then Fort Griswold, I also attended the archaeology event.
Councilor Aubry.
I stayed cool.
Councilor Atwater. Councilor Schmidt.
I have been getting calls from different residents in the Mystic area about the rubbish removal.
And Councilor Sperry.
I stayed cool with Leanne.
All right, so I attended Nikki's retirement as well. It was very nice, and we thank her for her service to the town. Representative McDermott is here this evening. He was in contact regarding the entrance to Town Hall and his concern about the appearance of the entrance to Town Hall. So Mr. Burt very kindly took a meeting with him, and he's going to be implementing some measures that are cost-friendly to spruce it up a bit. I've been in contact with the campus director at Avery Point regarding their gallery and possibly having some shows there, and she wanted to know if the council was interested in sponsoring any of those shows, so I hope to meet with her regarding that. I attended the archaeology event at Fort Griswold. It was wonderful. Interesting request I had from the last graduating class of Mystic Academy. They had their 50th reunion, and they were making little mock diplomas, and they asked me to sign them, and they asked Dr. Grenier to sign them, so it was kind of entertaining. And then I met with Representative Dela Cruz regarding project labor agreements, and we'll be discussing that in August. If you haven't already received one, Fitch High School Marching Band, Music Boosters, is having a fundraiser August 1st at the Mystic Yachting Center to support their trip to the UK. And I met with Alice Foley in Mystic regarding some issues that she had, and the manager has been working on getting answers to her questions. And I think that's it. Oh, it's Ella Grasso's 100th birthday coming up next year, so they're looking for participation in some events, so we'll be looking at that further. All right, approval of minutes. Councilor Baumgartner.
So I move that we accept the resolution accepting Town Council Committee of the Whole minutes of the meeting of July 10th, 2018.
Second.
Moved by Baumgartner and seconded by Schmidt. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting the minutes of the COW of July 10th, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? So moved unanimously. New business. Councilor Parker, 5A, please. This is on page 9 in your packet. Thank thank you for whoever's paginating. Lisa, I assume?
Thank you. I make a motion to recommend a resolution appointing James Laughlin to the Cable Television Advisory Council. I so move.
Second.
Moved by Parker and seconded by Heed. And again, Counselor Zepari has agreed to resign from the Cable TV Advisory Council so that James Laughlin could be appointed to fill that spot. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? So moved unanimously. All right, so we are on to item 5B, and Mr. Reiner from the Planning and Development Office is with us, and we're going to take items 5B, 5F, and 5J all together. That way Mr. Reiner can not have to jump up and down from the table multiple times. So 5B, Councilor Franco, please. This is on page 10.
So I make a motion that the town council authorizes the town manager to fill the planner one position and fill any corresponding OPDS positions that may come vacant if an internal candidate is selected.
Second.
Moved by Franco, seconded by Heed. Mr. Reiner.
Good evening, John Reiner, Director of Planning and Development. Laid out a pretty detailed memo of why we need to fill this vacancy, critical position, and all the initiatives that we are currently working on within the office. Just in the short time that the position has been vacant, we're actually already seeing how some of the other staff are being pulled off some of the longer range projects and the impact that it's having. So we greatly request your support of filling this position. I think it's a critical position within the department. Happy to answer any questions or get into more details.
Councilor Atwater.
John, I just had a question on the job description. The last time it was revised was in 1999. That's 20 years ago. Is it necessary to update the job description at this time?
I think it's a pretty broad-based job description. At some point in time, we've tried to update our job description for different positions over the last few years. I think that's something that HR has been, and the manager's office has been working on with us whenever the opportunity arises. It's something we can certainly look at. I think it does accurately reflect most of what we're doing now. Again, it's broad enough. It's not too specific into any program or something like that that's out of date.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of authorizing the manager to fill the planner one position, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I'm sorry.
Question, okay.
Yes.
It says on page 11, I guess, no formal action is required, but it's a consequence.
If you read the rest, it says it requires the concurrence of the council, so we're just
Right,
trying to get a
right.
concurrence at this point.
You do that by a vote rather than just a show of hands or something.
What's your preference?
I'm just... Fine.
We'll vote if there's no objection. Anybody?
No problem.
Okay. You object?
No, I'll go along with the vote. I just was questioning.
Okay. I don't know any other, we could say, is there any objection to filling the planner one position? So moved unanimously. 5F, Councilor Heed. This is on page 18. This is 2018-86, the blight ordinance presentation. I don't think,
Sorry, you took it out of order, so I wasn't prepared to read it.
there's no formal recommendation, just, you can just,
So I'll just make a motion to approve
It's
the...
right here.
Oh. I'll make a motion to consider if the town should include unregistered, unlicensed vehicles in the blight ordinance.
all right. There is no action required at this point, so we don't need that to be.
There's a staff recommendation.
At this point in time, we were just giving a presentation highlighting some, the blight ordinance, not looking for the council to take any action or any steps tonight, maybe give us a little direction based on a very brief presentation of blight.
So we can leave that on the floor, and then whatever we concur tonight, then he can use as his direction for a future event. Mr. Reiner.
Again, good evening. John Reiner, Director of Planning and Development. With me here tonight is Tom Zanarini, our Code Enforcement Officer. And I think we had a request from the council to give a very brief update on how we handle blight, how we define blight, the process we take, as well as some of the timelines that are within our ordinance, as well as the requirements from the state of Connecticut. Tom and I put together a pretty detailed memo here. He can give a brief overview of how we deal with blight, but I think the main theme is we're always looking for compliance, for people to work with us. We approach this in a fair and transparent way, trying to be aware of homeowners and people that are impacted as far as neighbors, as well as the folks that there may be a blight complaint against. So that's our general premise of how we go, and I'll hand it off to Tom, and he can give a brief overview of how we look at blight in town.
Good evening, councilors. For the record, Tom Zanarini, Code Enforcement Officer and Planner. And in the memorandum, I'm just going to highlight some of these points to go after what I do in my position as Code Enforcement Officer, which is also the Blight Enforcement Officer. So the ordinance follows the state statutes for penalties, and it's regarding nuisance violations, and penalties are attached. Blight is defined in Section 2A of the town blight ordinance as a blighted premise means any building, structure, or parcel of land where at least one of the following conditions exist. If the condition exists that poses a serious or immediate threat to the health, safety, or general welfare of the community, a building or structure is a fire hazard, or the property is in a state of disrepair or is becoming dilapidated. And then there is a list of continuous situations that we follow for specific blight regulations. So the enforcement of the blight typically begins with a citizen's complaint. I receive citizens' complaints both by phone, or all by phone, email, and a written blight complaint form. Once I have that, it's typically 1 to 2 days to go out and inspect the property. Could be 5 days depending on the workload that I have at that time. If blight does exist, I'll send a letter to the property owner asking them to remediate the situation. There are instances where some properties are in foreclosure. In that case, we have a list of those properties. Usually in that list is an email address for a property management company, which is faster if I can just send them an email telling them to do the same. So the state statute requires that we give the reasonable opportunity for the owner and occupant to remediate the blighted situation. And the reasonable opportunity can depend on what the blight is. If it's simply tall grass, I would say please remediate it in 14 days. If it's a situation where the house is dilapidated, if a roof's falling in, windows are missing, we can give 30 to 60 days because it could take time to get some money together, get a contractor, get a permit, and so on. So what we do is, as John said, we take a compliance approach. We have fines that are available to us, but I find it easier and just expedites the situation if I continue to, work with the person who's in control, to try and get the situation at hand and know that we're not going to leave it alone. And if I send a letter within 30 days, keep in contact with them and just look for progress. And that way, the complainant also knows that we're following up, and I can give them an update when they ask us. So I've attached different ordinances from other towns, from Stonington, from Waterford, and New London, and they're all very similar. Stonington has no vegetation in theirs. They call it a distressed premise ordinance. Waterford includes inoperable and unlicensed vehicles, and New London also includes the unlicensed vehicles. And the first notice, they have a strict rule of 5 days to comply. So, as far as the recommendations I've included, we have a lot of vehicle complaints of unregistered vehicles and junk vehicles on the property. Right now, that's enforced under the zoning ordinance, which is a different set of standards that can involve an appeal that can go to the Zoning Board of Appeals and then to Superior Court. I would recommend that it be placed under the blight ordinance. We have a different set of standards as far as enforcement that I just gave out, and we also have the blight citation officer that we can hear cases in-house. So that sums up how the blight ordinance works. If you have any questions, feel free to take your questions.
Councilor Overy, did you have questions?
Yes. Is there any training for your position, or is that something you just learn to do as you go forward with it?
There is training available, and I did recently go to a seminar in Hartford that was 2 days long from a national organization. I've picked it up. I've done zoning enforcement and planning for quite some time. So it is a kind of learn on the go, but there are courses available for this job.
The problem that I've seen, and I don't know how we correct it, I'm thinking that we need to go back and review our blight ordinances. Because I've run into several situations, some of them as you know, where the backyard, and this is not the property in Mystic, this is properties that I've been working with, and that the neighbors' situation behind the house has devalued the property that's on the market. And there's nothing in there that talks about that situation. Now, I know there's a house on Breezy Knoll that you've probably been to several times. Ledge Light went there. But these people are still fighting with a terrible blight in the neighbor's backyard. Front yard looks very nice. Backyard is terrible. Rodents coming out, the whole thing. So what would your feeling be on revisiting these regulations and being a little bit more aggressive with the people that are causing the loss of value to the other people?
Sure, I'm always open to revisiting the ordinance if the council would so desire. I think we'd have to look at the definitions and probably go into more depth of what we can consider blight. If it's old property, like you said, some portions of the property are well kept. If there's a small situation in the backyard where there's a condition developing, maybe they've just that's their little dumping ground. And right now, I don't feel that our ordinance does address that. But with advice from the council, we could revisit that.
To find a way to work with, and because I'm on the other side as I'm talking to people, and I've had several people in my role as counselor. As I go to meet them with other things, that's the first thing that seems to be a conversation about. Is, what am I going to do about my neighbor's yard? And, I experienced one where there was old air conditioners, there was old equipment, there was all kinds of stuff in the backyard, and there was nothing that could be done about it.
If you, in one of my attachments, I believe it's the town of Waterford has a little more on their list than we have. And bear with me 1 second. They have a situation here for mechanical equipment. Any apparatus designed to operate by internal combustion engine or designed to be towed, that is included. It gives them another opportunity to enforce debris, abandoned, discarded, unused objects, junk, compromised equipment such as automobiles, boats, recreation vehicles, furniture, appliances, cans, boxes, scrap metal. Simple definition addition.
Yeah.
Might be called for.
Well, as I said, I don't know how everybody feels about it, but I think it's something that needs to be revisited. I think our blight ordinance needs to be stronger and more helpful to the people that are having problems that are not theirs and that they can't really do anything about. So I don't know how the rest of the council feels.
We have Mr. Burt and then two other councilors, and then I have something to say.
I was just going to suggest that, we have some, first of all, I'm sure there's some addresses of that would fall under this, but we can review these other ordinances and come back with have some internal dialogue and make some recommendations of what we think might be helpful to clean up some of these.
Okay.
Would on page 18, bullet 3, blighted premises means, and then you have 3 bullets there, 1, 2, and 3. It says a nuisance to the general public. Would that not be covering what Councilor Obrey is concerned with?
There's a specific list of 10 items, though, which is where you would put something like that in the one.
Can I jump in?
Councilor, and then Councilor Baumgartner.
It does say in one of the sections here of the ordinance that's a handout that I guess you give the public. Item J says the overall condition of the property, structure, and/or grounds causes an unreasonable impact on the value of neighboring properties. How was that established? And how
I
do
think
you see
that's
this?
vague enough to be interpreted in any type of way. So the way I've seen that is the overall condition of the property. What we've talked about here is a specific area that might have some things in it, but the overall condition of the property, if you would look at it, it does not look blighted.
So as Leanne was saying, if it's something that would impact the value of a neighboring house,
Well, maybe
It's
then it's a
vague.
matter of reviewing how it's being carried out then. Because my experience has been, it's the front of the house. It's not the back of the house. They will only go into the backyard, my understanding, could be wrong, is if there's a rodent problem. And I don't think we're really addressing the problem as seriously as we should.
So just to couple with what Councilor Franco is saying, it seems like we already have the ability built into the ordinance, and it's just a matter of taking that specific clause and using it as an enforcement measure, kind of like what we decided to do with the noise ordinance, rather than writing something new, just asking the chief to further implement that. We will get you, Councilor Baumgart.
I just would like to get attorney opinion on exactly if we could make it that broad off that language. I think we're better off though adding some specific things too that we know, we see it right there, we can show them and get it cleaned up.
Yeah, sorry, very quickly, this ordinance was adopted in 1993. I think people are trying to take a first blush approach at it, and I agree with the manager's recommendation that we go to the town attorney, because right now that might not be specific enough, because it can be argued well from both sides, and that would be the answer.
Where we need to, no, we can strengthen it up.
Councilor Baumgartner, and then back to Franco. I'm sorry, I shouldn't finish.
It's okay. So has the town held a citation hearing after a willful violation, and if so, how many?
We haven't. I've been here with the town about 1.5 years. We have not had a hearing yet. All the blight situation I'm working on, I've had a couple that have been long-term. One that is actually, it was years and years that it was going on. It's finally, about 3 months ago, it started to be remediated. The property was sold, and the new owner that bought it is taking care of it and cleaning up the trees and brush, and was 5-foot high grass. That's all cut. The demolition is in progress with some portions of the house. But the majority of what I have are tall grass complaints.
And has your office levied or issued any fines?
No, again, right now we're working at compliance. The fines for some of these situations, I think this might exacerbate a problem. If there's a situation like the one I just described, the person who lived there before had no money, really, and had to move out of the house and was elderly. Fines would be better off just going towards remediation. I mean, I think the punishment at that point just doesn't seem reasonable. If someone is ignoring a situation, not responding, this person was constantly responding, giving me updates, calling me, I didn't have to chase her down. A separate situation, if someone was just ignoring everything, yes, the only way to do it would be go to the citation hearing.
And one suggestion I would have if we were to rewrite the ordinance is that if there were sort of any revenues associated with those fines, that there's almost like a lockbox, and that it goes back to perhaps paying towards his salary. And so that's just one suggestion. And thank you.
Councilor Franco needed to finish hers, and then over to Atwater and Zepari.
So I was just wondering, as a blight officer and a code enforcer, is that your does that take up 100% of your job duties?
I'm also a planner 1, so I do some planning, site plan and special permit applications as well.
Okay. And then I had a question about the junk vehicles. So to be clear, a junk vehicle is an unregistered vehicle, is that what you're saying? And there's a
junk
certain
vehicles
amount that have to be on a property?
Right.
And they can't be on the street, is that correct?
That's correct. That would be not a zoning issue then. That would be a public works issue. Yeah, sorry, junk vehicle is more of the slang term of an unregistered, unusable vehicle. So right now in the zoning ordinance, the person can have, and depending on the zoning district that they're in, so let's say if it's RS, 1 unregistered vehicle, but it has to be in the side of the rear of the property where it's not viewed from public, and they can only have it for 6 months.
Okay, but let's just say somebody owns 7 vehicles, they're all registered, they all run, and they're parked on the street in front of their house. there's no violation, correct?
If they're on the street, no, that would be not a zoning concern.
Okay,
And if they're registered, they're on the street, then that's fine.
Okay.
Unless there's a parking restriction.
and I think that's all I had to ask.
Counselor Atwater?
I just wanted to express my opinion that I think, as the town manager said, defining things in there makes it much more clear. Certainly is not as vague if you go to litigation, because it states it right in there. And my only other comment is, John, it says here that the ordinance was adopted in 2013, and you said 1993?
Sorry, 2013. Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. If I said 19, I misspoke. Yeah, 2013,
Thank
just
you.
a few years ago.
Thank you.
Counselor Perry and then Heed.
First of all, I agree with the thrust of this. I think that it's unfortunate, and we should not permit property to be in such poor repair that it decreases the value of the property next to, or makes it more difficult for people to have quiet enjoyment of the neighboring properties. The only thing I would like to consider in this is some avenue of public assistance for people who are too old and too poor or very infirmed and cannot clean this up themselves and can't afford to hire someone to do it. Can we add to this an ordinance where, in some way or another, even if it requires coming to the council and asking for authorization, the town does the cleanup? I just think that you can't just have, when you have an ordinance that flat out, you park in the wrong place, you're going to get a ticket. I think we have to have some way of considering special needs for individuals. There are a lot of people who live within months of their own death, and we know that. I mean, we have special clinics to take care of many people that are in that range. And there are a lot of people who are getting very elderly and can't go out and mow the lawn and have so little money and paying such high property taxes, by the way, that they can't afford to hire somebody to go mow the lawn. There has to be a way that we can help them. And so I would put the heart back into it. I'd follow Hillary Clinton's recommendation that it takes a village. But we have to keep the town clean and looking good for everybody that lives in it. You can't tolerate a mess. I mean, it just makes the town look bad. It makes the people that are living there suffer more. At the same time, we have to do it with a heart so that we can take care of the people who have special needs. I don't know how we would phrase that in your ordinance, but somehow or other, I think we should have an out provision where we can assist the very needy get the job done, but still demand that the job gets done.
Mr. Burt wanted in, then Counselor Heed and Parker.
I don't disagree. I just want to talk to our attorney about it more and see if other communities are doing it. We'd probably, we'd have to have minimum, we'd have to have a threshold for the income and have like Human Services help us review it. They'd be pretty involved, but we'll definitely research it and get back to you.
Counselor Heed and then Parker.
On the process of the current blight ordinance, it indicates that you have to have a complaint before an inspection occurs. I wonder if that's maybe a little passive, because sometimes, like, I may not want to complain against, my neighbor here because she knows that I'm complaining against her. We might want to change or look into changing that so that it's a little bit more flexible.
Sure. Like I said, I'll take complaints over the phone by email and not necessarily in our written form, because I understand, if someone contacts me, gives me their name and number, I'm happy to answer that. Are you asking if I should go out and proactively find blight? I mean, I have. I mean, at some situations where they're so bad, I think they warrant attention. I don't drive by something 10 times and wait for someone to call. I understand that. Sometimes people get maybe a little tone deaf to what's going on next to them. And if, a new set of eyes like me drives by, yeah, that might be different.
And we've also received,
Anonymous complaint, you mean?
I know Tom's gotten complaints from me, because I've driven by something and seen that, hey, that needs to be looked at from whether it's signage, blight, other departments around town. So it's not that somebody always has to submit a form and hit click or something.
All right, thanks.
Counselor Parker?
In regards to, you know, some of the complainants, you go to the properties, and I agree with Counselor Superi about contacting someone, but not having a fund, contact the local churches. There's probably some teenagers who can help, or churches who can come out and help and get the buildings and stuff clean for the people. I'm more open to calling someone and say, hey, you have a group of kids who can volunteer their time, they can get community service hours, and somebody from your office can sign off on it and say, hey, they did this for the community, and that way it's not that much of a cost, put a burden on the town. Just a suggestion. I just talked to someone about this the other day, so.
Thank you.
Counselor Schmidt?
Well, it does seem that blight is not a problem just to Groton. I've read in the Hartford Courant this morning about blight in Hartford and the attempts that they make to try to remediate what is happening. They say they have hundreds of buildings that are in a terrible condition, and it's very difficult because landlords have the right of appeal. They have to go through certain state statutes. And so I hope that our citizens are more responsive and coming back and taking care of a problem when it happens. But it is a difficult situation to handle.
Mr. Burton, then back to Councilor Baumgartner.
I just wanted to mention, I send a lot of requests Tom's way, and does a really great job of handling them and stays on top of them, gives regular updates.
Very good. Councilor Baumgartner, and then Franco, and then Aubrey.
And to follow up on Councilor Parker, perhaps it's a more appropriate idea if there were fines incurred to the sort of the more willful violators who are very blatantly ignoring the town, that perhaps there's a fund that's created by the council where potentially folks who may not be able to afford to remediate the issue or are simply too frail to fix the problem, maybe those funds could go towards that help.
Councilor Franco.
All right, I have two. I just want to be quick a little bit. How would you consider a building or structure a fire hazard?
For that, I would take in either the fire marshal or a building official. If I felt the building was, beyond a state of repair, there's signs of collapse, I would use their expertise for that.
And then there was a section about naturalized areas. So if somebody has natural wildflowers growing in their yard and they're like, it's a naturalized area compared to a lawn that's 2 feet tall that needs to be mowed, how do you distinguish the difference?
I think that would, warrant a conversation with the owner. Show me why that you're doing this. Is this, if you're doing this as a naturalized area in your front yard, obviously they might know more of what's going on. What's this plant? Is this native? You're doing this for this reason. If they could write something and state, on letterhead that that's what it is, then I would take it up the chain and get concurrence from Kevin Quinn and from John Reiner to see if that would be, we'd review it, and I wouldn't stop it at my level. We'd take it and
All right.
make sure it was true.
Thanks.
And Councilor Aubrey.
I guess the only other question I had was, you may have answered it, but when you see something that you feel might be a violation of something, do you have to have a complaint, or can you go and talk to them?
No, I don't have to have a complaint. Just because of the workload, it typically is complaint-based. But if there's, like I said, if there's something that I drive by and it seems so distressed that it warrants attention, I'll give it attention.
Do you kind of keep an eye out for unregistered cars?
Ones that pop into view, that are in front yards, that add to the blight situation, sure. Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll see how this progresses.
Are there any other questions or comments for Mr. Reiner or Mr. Zanarini? Okay, so the concurrence of the council is that you would like them to explore the blight ordinance a little more and take into consideration the comments that we've made, correct?
Yes,
Correct.
please.
Okay. All right, so then, Councilor Aubrey, we're going to wrap up Mr. Reiner all at once, so we're moving to page 62.
Where are you finding those numbers tonight?
This is item 5J, 2018-81 Sealy easement from the city of Groton on page 62.
Easement? I don't have any numbers tonight.
Sorry, Mayor.
62.
right-hand corner.
62.
Thank you.
62. All right, thank you.
I'm almost there.
Too far.
Yep.
Oh, did you take stuff out of order? Okay. Here.
I did drop it today.
Okay. So you want to go here.
Okay, to recommend a resolution authorizing the town manager to sign and accept the City of Groton utility easement for 55 Sealy School Drive.
Second.
Moved by Aubrey and seconded by Atwater. Ah, a map. Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Reiner. Thank
Good
you,
evening.
Mr.
So
Zagon.
the town requested of Groton Utilities, the city of Groton, a 50-foot wide easement across the water utility property. Currently, there's a 15-foot wide pedestrian access easement. So Sealy School Drive, Walker Hill Road. Today, Sealy School Drive is the only access point to our property. We wanted to look at other options for egress for the property, not having as much of an impact on the neighborhood at Sealy School Drive. The city crafted up an easement, was approved by the city, and that would allow for some flexibility in the future design of the site.
Very good.
Where's it go across?
The water tower property. So today, there's now 2 tanks out there, the new one under construction. Once
Right.
that is constructed, fully functional, the Groton Utilities will take down the old tank, and that'll be a 50-foot access easement area that we could utilize. We don't have to utilize it, but it's something, it gives us an option.
That could open up the Sealy property for us?
Well, it gives us more access. Yeah.
Would be
It's,
second
it's
egress.
much more preferable than, I mean, our idealized route would be, access would be Route 12, but if that didn't work out, this is better than Sealy School Road.
Right.
And it's between the luthiers and the current water tower, right?
Yes.
I think it's a great swap.
Well, it's-
They didn't even charge us. Yeah.
Right. It's a nice cooperation with the city on this. Anyone else?
Oh, I wanted to thank Groton Utilities too. Ron Goudet was great working with us on it, besides the city.
Excellent. Excellent.
Okay, Vanna.
Okay. So then we're recommending to sign and accept the utility easement, the Groton utility easement for 55
Thank
Sealy
you.
School Drive. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining?
Thank you.
Excellent, so that moved. Thank you. All right, so now, Counselor Atwater, we are back in the normal order, since Mr. Reiner has fulfilled all his duties this evening. We're on 5C, 2018-87, request to fill police department vacancy, and this is on page 14. And Chief Fasaro is with us this evening. Thank you, Chief.
Would you like a motion first?
Yes, please.
I move that we authorize the police department to hire 2 full-time patrol officers and 1 part-time telecommunicator.
Moved by Atwater, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Schmidt. Chief Fasaro, would you like to address?
Thank you. First, I want to point out the loss of 2 long-serving members of the department. Our most senior supervisor, our most senior sergeant, tendered his retirement letter about a month ago. His last day of service to the town was on Friday. He's using up some of his accrued leave, and that's Sergeant Keith Ashby. And about a month ago, on June 21st, our most senior detective retired as well, and that was Detective Rob Emery. Both of them served the town for in excess of 27 years. Both did great service, not just to the town, but to the professional law enforcement. So I want to acknowledge their service to this great town and also to this great line of work. So I appreciate that, and I know that's the sentiments of everyone in the department. But having lost 2 key figures, we're looking to replace both of them. They would be through entry-level officers. We do have 2 slots reserved for the academy class that starts in October at the Connecticut Police Officer Standards and Training Council Academy in Meriden. So we've secured those. The hope is that we'll be able to find 2 candidates between now and then to accept those seats. The reason I come before you now is it's kind of a lengthy and arduous process that we put applicants through. I think I outlined it in the memo to the council, but just to summarize it, we first provide them with a written exam, and that's done through the Law Enforcement Council, which is our regional chiefs organization. Once they've gone through that, we give them a physical agility test that they have to pass in accordance with post standards. Then there is a oral exam. After that, they come before me for a chief's interview, and those that are high enough on the list, we advance towards a polygraph, which is a lie detector test. Then from there, they go to a psychological exam, medical exam, and if all that passes, if they make it through that, we give them a pretty detailed background investigation to make sure they're suitable for employment in law enforcement, and that's when they get hired. At some point during the process, we do, in conjunction with Human Resources, give them a conditional offer of employment, but the condition is they have to meet all the other standards. So it's a lengthy process. We're hoping that we'll be able to get 2 candidates for that October class. My intent is to start moving forward on that now, and that's where I come before you about the police officer positions. The other position is for a part-time dispatcher. Back in November, we advertised, and then in December, we re-advertised for dispatchers, but the caveat in December was that we put out a solicitation for full and part-time dispatch positions within the communication center. As a result of that, we do have an individual that is qualified and has gone through the selection process and has indicated he would be interested in a part-time dispatcher position. However, I want to get the council's concurrence before we move forward on that hire.
And Councilor Perry had a concern about these 2 items.
There seem to be 2 issues that you're presenting to us in the form of one resolution. The first issue is to replace officers for whom there's already been funding and and just maintain your force at its present strength. The second issue is to add a new person and a new expense to the operation of your department. And I would like to consider them separately. And so I am moving that we consider them separately and then decide on them separately, if we can.
So would Councilors Atwater and Schmidt be willing to withdraw their motion?
I withdraw my second.
I would on their motion.
Thank you. So Councilor Perry, would you like to move consideration of?
I move consideration first that we replace the 2 officers who are currently retiring and for the point of discussion.
Moved by Perry, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Heed. Did you have something further you wanted to discuss with that particular matter of the 2 officers?
Well, I would just like to ask if I'm allowed, it hasn't been seconded?
Yes, it has.
Okay. I'd just like to, get my thoughts together. Got to get my brain in gear before I put my mouth in motion. We are facing an economic crisis in Groton, in the town of Groton. We are heavily dependent upon state grants to operate our budget. Our school system is about half paid for by the state grants, and that's going to evaporate, we anticipate, in about 4 years. We'll have none of that. So with that going, I would think that would require an increase in taxes of about 30%. I don't have the financial officer here to back me up, but just considering the amount of money that we're facing. And I think we have to ask department heads, is this absolutely necessary? Can you deal safely with less than 2 those 2 posts being replaced? Can you continue to safely assure the safety of our community without both of those people?
Well, I can't really answer that directly. I can say to you that, the potential exists for things to happen in this line of work where we need all hands on deck. And it would also, I think it's also critically important to point out in law enforcement that as much as our job is to protect public safety, we have a duty to protect our officers as well.
Sure.
And if we ensure proper staffing, that helps not only protect people in the public, but also ensures that our officers, go home at the end of their shift. Sure. That they, they're subject to assaults and physical injury through a variety of different methods. When we reduce the number of officers, it has a couple of effects. We still need to fill the positions, which means overtime increases. And we also, subject these officers to less time off. We restrict their ability to take time off and afford them earned and accrued leave when they really need to take it for both physical and mental well-being, to take some time off and vacation time. I certainly appreciate that, and I can tell you that this department has done everything it can to make sure that we are frugal with the money that the citizens give us. And we make sure that when we go out and we replace people, that we replace them with suitable individuals that are the best this community and this area has to offer in the form of officers that patrol the streets of the town of Groton. There are certainly tough decisions that the council and the RTM have to make, but the positions I come before you have been funded in the budget. And it presents the challenge that, we're talking about the town department, and we do have the funding to do this. Can we do things safely? Yes, up until it's no longer safe, right? And that's kind of a...
Yeah, and where is that? The reason I'm bringing it up, Chief, is that in 4 years, we're going to have to say, we need $30 million, or $36 million, or maybe even $40 million at that point that we no longer have. And so we're going to go to the department heads and say, look, you've got to cut your budget by 20%. And or even 30%, and that would mean laying off people you've already hired. And the reason why we're asking people to come in and make a case for replacing employees is that it's so much better not to hire someone in the first place than it is to fire them later, even though it's not for cause, it's because of lack of funds to pay for them. So I think we come back and we say to you at this point, can you get along without both of them? Could you get along with one of them?
I prefer not to get along with less, if that's what you're asking me.
How much are you digging in, Chief?
I'm telling you that our officers are coming in at an entry-level salary as opposed to two officers that have retired, which are at the top of the pay scale on both their respective...
In 4 years, they won't be at entry-level salary anymore.
Right. And just for a point of clarification, we also, on average, lose about 2.5 employees from the police department a year, officers. So
Well, I want our cops to be safe. I want our people to be safe, and I'm willing to go the extra mile for it. But I'm asking you to come our way a little bit too, and consider what we're facing as the future unfolds for us.
Absolutely, I do understand that, and I appreciate that. And
so I'm not going to stand hard against you on this issue, but I'd like to bring your attention to the facts of life that we're looking at from this point of view, and we have to take a real hard look at this at this point, and not wait until 4 years from now when we're facing a sudden crunch without the state money coming into the town. So I've said my piece.
Councilor Franco.
I wasn't aware that in 3 or 4 years we're going to be losing $30 million. Is that what you are aware of, Town Manager?
Well, I don't pretend to have a crystal ball. My concern would really be more of, as we come off being an alliance district, that we could lose several million. That would be, to me, the more likely scenario. And we're working diligently to increase our tax base, and we've got, of course, EV's expansion and doing what we can to increase our tax base. But also, Joe's point's well taken, that we need to always review and always question everything to see what could be cut off. But with the state, though, I don't rule anything out with the state, but I'd be surprised if we had a big drop in grants like that.
Okay. And then also, as you said, this is replacing current officers with less paying officers. And do you normally have a minimum that you keep on a shift?
we fill positions. We do have staffing, sort of. I don't mean to be ambiguous on that, but we do, you know, we fill positions at different staffing levels during different parts of the day, on weekends as opposed to during the week. So yes, there are positions that we need to fill, and we make sure that we have suitable people to cover each of the patrol areas.
And if you don't have basically your minimum, you have to call in other guys to work overtime.
Right. We either hold them over, which means instead of going home at the end of their shift, they stay for 4 hours, and then we call somebody else in early for their oncoming shift. So if we don't have enough staffing for a given shift, then we do order people in.
All right. Mr. Burke?
I just wanted to remind the council, we do go through an exercise through the budget process of if you were cut, which positions can you most do without? And I've yet to see the boots on the ground main patrol be in that list. I think we dropped a lieutenant's position
We did.
during that budget
Yeah,
process.
there was a lieutenant's position that was not funded this year. It has not been filled. I'm not talking about that one. Even this is beyond that position, so this is actually, we're already at a -1 delta because that position hasn't been filled, and I'm not asking to fill it. So this is 2 slots below that.
Are there other
Or beyond
councilors
that.
who had questions? Oh, Councilor Over.
When they go for training, is there a cost to the town for that?
Absolutely.
And what's about, have
For-
we figured that into this?
Yeah, we do plan that in our budget process. You know, for officers that go to the academy, it's about $2,500 per seat. A few years ago, it used to be free, but like everything else in the state of Connecticut, the state is looking for additional revenue as well, so sometimes the municipalities are then funding those positions. So there is a cost to every academy seat that we get, plus there's you know, the personnel costs that we have to train them and that sort of stuff. Really, we don't get the benefit of a person that we hire. If we hired somebody today as a new officer, we're really not going to see any benefit from that individual for a year. Because when they go to the academy for 6 months and then another 16 weeks on the FTO program, by the time we've hired them, we get them trained, we get them through the academy and completed with the FTO program, it's about a year before we really get the benefit. So that's when they become an asset, when they're independent.
The reason I was asking the question is, to me, it would almost seem better to send 3, because chances are at the end of the year, you've lost one already.
Well, we can only get with the academy, you know, in Connecticut, there's 1 police academy. There's a couple of satellite academies. The state police has a separate academy, but there's 1 municipal police academy. Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport, sometimes will run their own satellite academies, but we're competing with those seats with every other department in the state of Connecticut. So when they put a class of 34 in October, you know, we're looking for 2 of those seats of the, you know, roughly 100 other police departments here in the state of Connecticut. So we're competing with others to get those slots. So we can't just say we want to send 3. We have to ask for the slots first,
Right, okay.
many months in
Yeah.
advance, and then they say, okay, we'll give you 1 or we'll give you 2. We just happen to get 2 for this upcoming class.
Probably an unanswerable question, but how often do you do this and then end up with less than what you've sent to the school at the end of the year?
In my experience here, everyone we've sent to the academy has completed the academy. Prior, you know, we would bring a lot of people into the academy in my prior employment, and we would end up with a lot less in the end. But you know, I commit to you, and I make sure that when we hire people with the intent that they succeed. We try to find the best candidates available, so that they're going to make it through the academy. We try to provide them with the support and assistance that we can while they're at the academy to make sure they're successful.
Do they have to make any kind of a commitment to the town when we make this agreement with them?
The commitment is this. Right now, the way state law works is that if they are hired by our department and they successfully complete their training, they have to stay with our department for up to 2 years. If they leave before that time, then they're going to have to repay some cost to the town. In fact, we exercised that a couple of years ago when an officer left before that 2 years. There was, at the time, a contract provision that allowed us to recoup some funds. If for some reason they don't make it through the academy, or they, choose that, law enforcement is not their line of work, then no, we don't recoup anything for that. And I don't know of anyone in this line of work who does, any agency that does.
Here we have Councilor Atwater, Baumgardner, and then Schmidt.
No, he just answered my question.
Oh, okay.
My first comment was when I was asked to withdraw my motion to split this. I think it was stated that hiring a telecommunicator was going to cost us a lot more money, and I found in my notes here as I was looking that it says the fiscal year ending in 2019 budget has allocations for a part-time dispatcher, so it's not going to increase what's been funded.
I have not been able to address that yet, but I'd be happy to if you want me to wait for that part of the discussion.
No, that's, well, but I just want to make that comment. My second thought is that we go through a complete budget process in April. People come in and hear us and so forth. It goes to RTM, it's voted on and so forth. I think now, in my mind, this is not the time to start changing the funding and the rules and the number of people that we have and so forth. That was done in a more open forum back in April, and I don't think it's really the time to do it here now. My third comment, and I don't know how this plays out, but I just think we talk about being an alliance district and losing money in 4 years, and there's no guarantee that we will or not. And I guess my thought there is that this, to me, is a very essential and necessary department. And if we're losing the alliance money, which came because of our education department, then maybe that responsibility should be in the education department as far as making up that loss. And it's just a thought, but it's...
Councilor Baumgart.
Well, first and foremost, I wish our retiring officers a very healthy and enjoyable retirement, especially for their years of service. And secondly, will there be an enhanced effort to recruit from folks who either grew up in the area or live in the area? And secondly, potentially minority or
Sure.
Women officers?
Yeah, absolutely. Our department has a pretty high percentage of female officers. Obviously, anybody that's grown up in this area or has been a lifelong resident of Groton or is a minority population, certainly I encourage them to apply. And yeah, absolutely. We're starting to do that recruitment effort now, but until this discussion happened, I didn't want to push too far forward. And the other point that I failed to mention earlier, which I think is critically important, may address some of the concerns that you had, Councilor, which is, unfortunately, in this line of work, people do get hurt. And right now, even though I'm asking you for positions to fill, long-serving officers who have retired, it's good to point out, or I think it's important to point out, that as we speak right now, we have 3 officers that are out on disability leave that got hurt in the line of duty. One in a physical altercation, one got hurt while they were in training, and the third person had a persistent training injury or injury that occurred prior. But 3 officers that are no longer or not currently working, and we're not getting the full benefit of them. So those are positions that we now have to replace. So making sure we have adequate staffing is critically important. And it's also important to point out that right now we have 1 person on military leave, extended military leave. This time last year when I talked to the council, we had 2 individuals from within our ranks that were on extended active duty orders. So I failed to mention that earlier, but I think it's important to point out that in addition to those men and women who are working every day, we have individuals that are serving our country on active duty, and we also have others that have been serving the town that have gotten injured and that are not really able to work right now, and we need to replace them as well.
Seeing no further discussion, we're going to take this in 2 parts then. Are we in favor of authorizing the hiring of 2 full-time patrol officers? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? So moved unanimously. All right, so now we need the second half of this. Councilor Perry or Councilor Schmidt, would you read it?
Yes, I just say that I want to recommend that we have a resolution to authorize the hiring of 1 part-time telecommunicator.
Moved by Schmidt, is there a second? Second. Seconded by Heed. Chief, did you want to discuss this?
Yes, please. This individual, the one that I come before you as far as a part-time telecommunicator, if you recall about 2 weeks ago, you considered the new pay plan. And one of the components of that was a part-time pay plan for telecommunicators. It hadn't existed before, and there wasn't really a need. But in recent years and in conversations with the Human Resources Director and the Town Manager, we saw the benefit of having some number of part-time folks helping out in the dispatch center. There is a considerable amount of training that gets people qualified to work there. It's not a matter of just answering a phone and sending people to calls. There's a lot of stuff that goes along with it. In fact, earlier today, unrelated to this conversation, I had the opportunity to review a 911 call that one of our dispatchers did an outstanding job on, and it kind of highlights some of the stressors that they're put under when they're answering that 911 call. And on the other end, the phone hangs up, and when a dispatcher calls back and hears a physical altercation going on in the background between a man and a woman, that's clearly a domestic violence incident, and the individual called back and lied to our dispatcher saying there's absolutely no problem. But in this case, they spent an inordinate amount of time on the phone trying to make sure that the situation was as safe as they could make it over the telephone, but also providing our officers, as they went to this, the information they needed to properly investigate it and make an arrest. Having said that, what I'm looking for is a part-time dispatcher. Again, the person has already gone through our selection process. We currently have 12 full-time dispatchers. In this year's budget, we're authorized a 13th full-timer. And that was appropriated during the budget process. I'm not looking to fill that one. The part-time would fill gaps where they exist for our current staffing members. We've seen an increase in overtime over the last 3 or 4 years, and that's been corresponding with the number of positions that we have filled of the full-time staff. Here's what I mean. A couple of years ago, when there was 13 full-time dispatchers, our overtime cost was considerably less than it is now. Now, we're at, in 2016, we had 13 dispatchers, 2017, 12, and earlier this year, until a hiring in May, we had 11. So correspondingly, the overtime has gone up. This is an attempt to mitigate some of that. When I say part-time, we'd be working with our HR director to find out what the amount of hours they could work, whether there's any benefits associated. The intent is not to have benefited positions. The intent is to have people that fill in, also go through the training regiment, which can take many months, and we do all that training in-house. And also, ultimately, our hopes is that sometime as we attrit others, that at least this full-time position might be able to fill, or this part-time position might be able to fill a full-time position down the road. I hope that I'm happy to address any other questions that you may have. I hope that gives some insight as to why this is an important position.
Councilor Zafiri.
How many telecommunicators do you have on duty at any time?
The question was asked to me before about minimum staffing. There is in the contract with the telecommunicators, minimum staffing, and the hours are, we generally have 3, a minimum of 3 from 6 a.m. to 1 a.m., and then on the overnight from 1 to 6, we'll go down to 2. Sometimes there's 4, depending on the schedule, because they work 10 or 12-hour shifts in order to fill all the slots throughout the week.
You say it goes down to 4, did you say? It goes down
No,
to 2?
It's minimum staffing from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. is 2 dispatchers. Okay. And I think it's good to point out to you that they're responsible for not just police, but all fire EMS. We also dispatch for paramedics out of Lawrence Memorial Hospital, as well as North Stonington Fire and Ambulance. So there's a variety of different things. And that situation that I explained to you before, that 911 call that I reviewed, I talked to a couple of the dispatchers that were involved. While that's going on, we have other incidents taking place. There may be fire calls. There may be officers out there with a traffic stop or another incident. So sometimes in the dispatch center, it's relatively calm. You could walk in there and there's not a lot going on, and a minute later, everyone's decisively engaged. And in fact, there are some situations where we may have an extra dispatcher on because of an overlap, and with all 4, there isn't enough people to handle the volume of calls that's happening. Good example would have been what happened last night, where we had a traffic accident and a DUI arrest resulting from the same incident, where an individual hit a building here in town, and meanwhile, while that was going on, there were other incidents taking place that required the attention of the dispatchers. And there's also mandates that we're required to adhere to through OSET, which is a state organization, Office of Emergency Telecommunications, Office of Statewide Emergency Telecommunications, where since we're a PSAP, which is a primary station answering point, where we get 911 calls from all of Groton and some of the surrounding towns, as well as cell phone locations on the I-95 corridor, and sometimes we'll get them from Fisher's Island and other areas. There's a requirement on how quickly our dispatchers have to answer that. It's a standard of 10 seconds. So if you're dialing 911 and we have one dispatcher in there and there's all kinds of other stuff going on, they may not answer it in 10 seconds, but that's auditable. That's done by the state of Connecticut. They come in and they look at that.
Chief, These other agencies that you're doing dispatching for, Lawrence Memorial EMTs, are they paying anything for the
Yes.
service?
They are. And in fact, because we're theoretically a regional dispatch center and because we dispatch for North Stonington, we actually get additional monies, grant monies to the town because of that, through the 911 fund and through OSET. We do get, the more communities you have, the more money you get, but each community that has, each community gets money, but regional PSAPs get additional money because the state wants to incentivize doing that.
Councilor Heed.
My question's partially related to this, so I apologize, it may not be directly related, but follow up on, during the budget process, we approved a measure to knock down the wall between the police officer and the reception area and the telecommunications area. Has that been effective?
It has not happened yet. It
Okay.
has not happened yet. Quite frankly, my priority, and I think the town manager prioritized this as well, is to get our radio system, which is our next agenda item, but our radio system has been #1 priority, but that hasn't begun yet.
And what I told the council and RTM is we'll hold off on the wall as well as the CAD system, just to have that money reserved to make sure there's no unexpected costs with the radio system. So we'll do those later in the year.
Thank you.
If we do run into an unexpected cost, we'll come back for the council and ask, would you rather us push this off, or do we want to do a contingency fund transfer? We'll worry about that. So far, though, we haven't run into anything big.
Councilor Parker.
The part-time telecommunicator, would that be like a per diem?
Yes.
It would be
Yeah.
on call, basically.
And that's what the hourly rate was that you approved a couple weeks ago. It's slightly different than what the full-time telecommunicators get, but yes, either part-time or scheduled days where we have a gap where we would have them fill in.
Or fill in when somebody's on vacation?
Correct.
Okay.
Councilor Schmidt.
I had a question. It's about the telecommunicators department. A couple of years ago, that we were told that their equipment was deficient and in many cases not working at all, and that it was very difficult for them because they should have desks that could rise and fall. I wondered if that had been taken care of.
In fact, it has. The last couple of weeks, the culmination of that project has finished, and they've all been upgraded.
Oh, good.
So,
Thank you.
so if you want to come over and see it sometime, I'd be happy to show you.
I will.
Looks like there's no further discussion, so we will vote on authorizing the hiring of one part-time telecommunicator. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining. So moved unanimously. We are on Councilors of Perry for item 5D. This is the memorandum of understanding between the town of Groton and state of Connecticut regarding the Connecticut Land Mobile Radio Network on page 16, please.
I'm sorry, it's on page 16.
Page 16, yes.
Let's see.
I move that the council authorize the town manager and the police chief to sign the memorandum of understanding agreement for use of the Connecticut Land Mobile Radio Network.
Okay, I'm just trying to recall what you said. Did that hit all the words we needed in the motion, Mr. Burt? There's an actual motion there. I was just trying to,
Down at the bottom of the page.
could you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, right.
We're good? Okay. Moved by Perry. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Aubrey. Chief.
As you know, we've been working with, we've been looking at our radio system for quite some time now, and we're at the cusp of entering into an agreement with the state of Connecticut, provided the council authorizes it, to utilize a statewide system. In fact, earlier today, I was talking to not just members of the state of Connecticut Office of, Connecticut Telecommunications System. I think they've had their name changed, but that's what I used to refer to them as and what I knew them to be. We're working with them and Motorola Incorporated, which is the vendor the state of Connecticut uses for their land mobile radio system, and that would be to upgrade our existing equipment at the police department, but then become a node within the state system. Will give us enhanced coverage, enhanced interoperability, and we will be working very closely with state officials. The benefit I see to this is that we will not be in the business of owning a radio system anymore. At least on the police side, we will be essentially a tenant on the state system. They have a lot of skilled people that manage their system, full-time state employees that are very talented and knowledgeable, will be benefiting from their experience and their expertise. But this memorandum of understanding is authored by the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection. It has already been vetted through the Attorney General's office. Our town attorney has reviewed it, has given me some feedback on it, some questions that she had that I think I've been able to clear up with her and make it comfortable, or make her comfortable with it. So I highly recommend the council authorize our signing of this. I think it's good for the town. I think it's the most economically viable option for our department and to procure a system that we desperately need. And the first part of that is to allow myself and the town manager to enter into that agreement.
Councilor Parker, did you have a question?
Two. Excuse me. Since we're no longer in the radio business, didn't we not used to get fees from everybody else to use the radio system?
Not for the police radio, no.
Okay.
This is exclusive to the police department.
Okay, double checking. And then will we be paying a fee to the state?
We'll be paying maintenance.
Maintenance fee?
Yes.
And how much was that going to be? Is that
I believe it
gonna-
was in the budget. It was somewhere in the neighborhood of $30,000.
Per year?
After the first year, yeah, in the 5-year contract. It was after the first year. We will be required to do that, and here's why. Radio systems are no longer, the transistors and that stuff. They're really sophisticated computer systems. They go through upgrades annually. There will be requirements for us to maintain it, and that's what the proposal we've gotten. It incorporates all of that. And I think over the course of the contract after the first year, because the first year is covered by a warranty from Motorola, it's going to be in the neighborhood of $100 and some odd thousand, $140,000 over the next 4 years. So I think that works out to, or the next 5 years, I think it works out to about $28,000 a year. Something we have to do, because I think one of the problems we had with the system we've got now is we kick the can down the road annually. The radio system that the police department currently has was state-of-the-art when it was put into play. Unfortunately, it was not maintained, and it's cost us a lot of money in repairs, replacement, and upgrades in the last 2 decades plus. And I sat before you and I sat before the RTM and outlined all the reasons why it was no longer functional and why it was a safety issue to our officers. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that it was probably not maintained the way it should be. The benefit to this is the state has negotiated the terms of those, the use of that system, not just with us, but with Motorola. So we need to pay that money. And we don't need to pay it just because it's nice to pay it. We need to pay it because if we fall behind in the maintenance of it, not only will it degrade, but we'll miss some critical updates that will essentially render the system unusable. That is in the MOU. That is in the proposal that we got from Motorola. It's think of it. I hate to make a car analogy, but it's like if you don't ever change the oil in your car, eventually you're going to have engine problems, and eventually you're going to need to buy a new car. We need to make sure we maintain this, and that's incorporated into both the MOU and the proposal we've received.
So just to clarify, during the budget, this council approved the CIP for entering the statewide radio system.
That's correct. Yes.
This authorization is required for us to implement that CIP that we already authorized.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other discussion?
You sure it wasn't 2 years and then we started the payments?
I beg your pardon? I'm not.
I thought it was 2 years that we had before we started the maintenance.
No, the contract that we've received has always been a first year. They implement it. If we implement it in August of 2019, then we will not be paying any maintenance until after August of 2020.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other discussion, all those in favor of 2018-89, say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstaining, so moved unanimously. I think that's it, Chief, correct?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we are back to Councilor Baumgartner for 5E, 2018-1, cost of living adjustment for retirees on page 17.
So I make a motion to continue discussion on item 2018-2, cost of living adjustments for retarees. So
Thank
moved.
you. by Baumgartner, seconded by Heed. And we have Mr. Burt and Mr. Zagami with us this evening to continue our discussion on the cost of living adjustment for retirees. Hello.
Hello, good evening. One of the things we had looked at on the COLAs was what would be the cost, and we came up with a figure about, I think it was around $65,000 in order to give all of the bargaining groups a 2% increase in COLA, which would represent people that have not had a COLA within the last 5 years.
Mr. Burt, did you want to add anything at this point?
No, that's fine. Well, I'll just, Mr. Cecilia from TPS that presented last time, he did send some follow-up information. I neglected to print it out, but just gave us some numbers of eligible retired numbers of retirees that are eligible, as well as the minimum monthly benefit, the median, and the maximum for the different union groups and non-union. But if you have any particular questions, I could go through that, or you want me to read the highlights?
Would you like it to be read, or do you want him to email it to us?
Want it to what?
He can either read it aloud to us, or he can email it to us.
And this was a question requested by, information requested by Mr. Sapiri.
He has your answer to your questions. Would you like to hear it now?
I asked him to send me an email with it. I have the email already.
You have it, okay.
Okay.
Do you have any follow-up regarding the email?
I just want to, the 2% that we're voting on, the 2% COLA now, is not a contractual arrangement. Do we have a contract that says we have to give a 2% COLA or any COLA at any time for any of these unions?
No, I think there's some, Bob will answer better, but I think there's some language on when we look at it, there's some timing language.
Yeah, there's language in the CBAs that we have to look at it every so often, but we do not have to, it's not contractual that we have to give that, but we have to, they could probably grieve it or complain about it or whatever, and then it would be brought to the council and make a final decision on. But otherwise, we go through many years, people or agencies will ask us if we're giving them a COLA, and, you know, depending upon our budget, which has been a little tight, we've been basically refusing it through these last few years.
Councilor Aubrey?
Got a few questions. I believe I read somewhere that there was, in fact, a retirement committee, and that they ultimately have to make the decision? Is that correct?
Not on COLAs, no.
Not on
That's a
COLAs?
council decision, yes.
I'm sorry?
But it's a council decision. on
Okay.
COLAs.
The retirement board does the actuarial assumption.
If you wanted to change, right now it's at 7.5% for the return on investment. We talked about
Right.
eventually getting it to 6.5. That is a retirement board power. And then, by the way, it's going to be on the next agenda to start discussing that.
They're gonna, are we gonna have an opportunity to talk with this commission?
We can.
I think it would be very good to be able to do that. Who is responsible for doing the interviews that are supposed to be done for our retirees? I believe there's a specific period of time that they're supposed to be, have the opportunity for a review.
Right, that would come to my office.
Okay, has that been done at all?
Yeah, the GMEA has requested, and also the AFSCME, which represents well, GMEA, first of all, that's the clerical unit.
Who's the GMA?
GMEA, that's the clerical unit.
I'm sorry?
The clerical unit.
Okay.
They do clerical work.
All right, well, the things that are bothering me is from the different people that have been in touch with me and conversations I've had, is that there's an obligation that we're supposed to be meeting with these people, whether it's in person or by phone or by mail or whatever, to have a review. And that's not been happening. And I think, number one, that's not correct. That should be corrected. And I don't know how you go about doing it, but I would like a response in the future as to how that's going to be done.
Well, it's not been neglected at all. I've gone through when we get these requests, I naturally go through these with our town attorney. And then with the town attorney, we also talk about the budget, because we do have to respond to it. There's not any time that isn't responded to.
Do they have to request it?
Yes.
And it's not, are you sure about that?
Well, it could go either way. You know, it's every 5 years in some contracts that they can appeal it and ask for that, and that's when they do. They'll send me a notice, and naturally I go through the attorney, and naturally at that point we go through the budget. And that's what's happened over these last few times. We've talked, I think, to the council, maybe not just this council, but the previous council, we've talked about the COLA quite a few times. So it's not like we're just sitting on it and not giving any response.
Well, I think that we have to have some process that's explained to us a little bit more for that, because there are people telling me that it's not being done. If that's something that they're supposed to be coming forward and asking for, which I expect is probably what the group is doing now.
The group, they do come to us. I do get a written statement from the union, so they do approach us.
And do we have somebody that we're in conversation with now?
Sure, we do that with, I do it with my attorney, I do it with myself, and then I finally get answers from either our town manager, whether or not, and he's got to look at the budget and see if it's something we can do, and that's pretty much what gives it. Otherwise, there's been letters from individuals, non-union retirees that have requested it on their own, and we've naturally had to respond. We always respond in kind with letters.
And why is it necessary to meet with an attorney in order to respond to this? Don't you have guidelines you go by?
Well, prior to this, the attorney was handling our negotiations. Now I'm not handling the negotiations.
I'm having a little problem with the process. Because I know we have people that are distressed about the situation, and I'd like to do what we can to relieve that. And I think that we need to know more. I feel, at least I feel like I need to know more. I need to know where it says what is appropriate to be being done. You know, where it says that they're supposed to come to you. I'm not talking about somebody who belongs to the union now. I'm talking about the people that have actually retired. And I doubt that they're still represented by the union, are they?
Well, they're not exactly represented by the union, but it is the union that sends me the request for the COLA increase. So if we want to know what the process is, in actuality, you have it in front of you right now, knowing that they're requesting that a 2% COLA be given and what the cost is. So now it's right here. We're in the process.
Will that go to the people that have already retired or the people that are employed presently?
Getting the COLA? I'm not sure if I understand your question.
Is COLA for the retired people also, people that have retired from the town?
Well, that's what the COLA, what we're talking about, is the retirement.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying to you, you're saying you're talking to the union. I'm asking you if you're talking to the people that are, when you talk to the union, do they represent the people that have already retired?
Yes. No, they are the ones requesting that we give them a COLA. It comes from the union. That's the union representatives send that letter to us, or that correspondence. Those are union representatives.
We're going to have to get a clarification for this, and I'm only speaking to myself. I can't speak for the rest of the councilors, but I don't think that this is being done correctly. And I think the people that have been retired from this town are being ignored. And I think that there has to be something that's set up that where we can also hear what they're feeling and their needs, not the union that's talking for the people that are working for us now. I look at that as two different situations. They got to be separated and they've got to be taken care of. you know, you come in and say, well, it would cost $65,000. $65,000 for what?
$65,000 represents the request for all of the unions that have 5 years without a COLA, they've retired for 5 years, and that they will get that 2% COLA per year.
That's exactly my point, and that's what I'm not understanding, and I apologize if it's on my part. But you're talking about unions. I'm talking about the people that have already retired are no longer part of that union. How do we take care of those people?
Well, if you want to take care of those people, then you approve the 2% COLA, and that'll take care of them.
That will
to
go
what
to
they're
them
asking you.
automatically?
If that's what you want, yeah, that's what would have to be approved.
I'm going to interject something right now.
Yep.
So the $65,000 is what it would cost us this year to do that. However, it adds $1.37 million unfunded liability to us. So it's not just like it's $65,000. If we did a 1% COLA, it would increase our unfunded liability by $700,000. So it's more than just a $65,000 thing at this point. And we did receive letters from all the individual retirees asking for a COLA. Many of those came to us in our packets via the clerk. Did you have other questions? If not, I have other counselors that wanted to ask things.
Sure, no, go right ahead.
Councilor Baumgardner and then Schmidt.
Well, I'd like to align my remarks with, align with the remarks made by Councilor Aubry on the need to clarify. But simply on the question of the assumed rate of return, what would the impact be on our ability to bond, and especially with the rating agencies?
To bond on this?
Well, in terms of bonding, there'd be an increased cost as we reduce the rate of return, which we'll want to do in a stepwise fashion, and that will be discussed at the Retirement Commission. That's going to be a several-year process. You're not going to do that in a year or two because of the increased cost. But the better the expectations, or the better the realistic expectation of return, the better we look for the bonding agencies. So it's good.
So absent of the...
But we have to be able to handle the cost of it. So you don't want to rush it, right?
No, absolutely. And so, but absent though of the cost of living percent increases, whether it's 1% or 2%, what would it be due to the reduction in that assumption?
Oh, sorry, say that again.
So reducing the rate of return from,
Right.
say, 7.5% to 6.5, what would it do to our, say, unfunded liability?
Well, if it's a $1.3 million, well, if that's for 6.5%, let me look at the page here. The difference between the two would be, let's see, 1.372 versus 1.9, so about overall liability about 500,000 for a difference between 6.5% return and 7.5% return.
But again, to interject, we can't do anything about the actuarial assumption. That's the thing that the retirement board has to deal with. So we can offer our guidance to Mr. Burton, then he could take it to the retirement board.
I think Councilor Aubry's comments are well taken. Now, Bob, I think there's some language in each union contract that lays out that they will request the COLAs for the retirees, but they don't actually represent them later then, so it's kind of a weird mixed bag, and I think that's where some of the confusion comes from. But we could certainly detail what that process is and come up with some better, especially on the non-union, come up with a better process, whether it's every other year or whatever we want to do, we can make some recommendations. So that shouldn't have to hold up any decisions on an immediate COLA. It would be for future requests.
And
Councilor Schmidt, oh, I'm sorry, were you not finished?
Just regarding the pension board, I'd certainly love to attend the next meeting when that's available, so can share
I'll put it on my weekly report and let you know when that next one is. It's about a week, or it's either the first week or second week of August. It's coming, so it's coming up real soon.
All right, thank you.
Give me a second, I'll look
Thank you.
it up there.
Councilor Schmidt.
I have two questions. I wondered, do non-union employees who are retired have to make a request? If they don't make a request, would they not be considered for a COLA?
Well, what happens is the non-union usually will send out individual requests.
Right.
It would be one person may send out, or a couple people
they have
may
a
send out.
representative.
They're not represented by anyone.
Right.
But in the event, the non-union, we determined that we would give the COLA to that group,
Right.
which it was done a couple of years ago. that would be that's how that plays out.
And I wonder, how do we find out how much people are receiving now for retirement? That seems to be part of the
In terms of from our retirement,
Right,
we
the
have the
dollar
median,
amount.
we have the
Right.
minimum, the median, and the
Right.
high,
Right.
but we don't have the individuals. And then we can't look at what they're getting for other outside retirements. That's not legally
Right.
allowed. So we can't ask their social security or any of that information.
So we don't know what people are receiving now?
Well, I'm sure we could find out. We've got the, like you said, we can find out from us, but not from
Right.
what they're receiving from other
Right.
sources.
Right.
We legally can't ask for that.
No, but what they are getting from the town of Groton.
Right.
So for clarification, before we go to Heaton and Perry, the non-union workers in the past few years received a cost of living adjustment, but the
It was
union
the
did not.
non-union police group. There was just a small group there.
They received a COLA.
Yes.
Counselor Heaton and Perry.
Seems to me we need to try and be fair about this, while also maintaining some fiscal discipline. So we find ourselves in a situation where regardless of party, regardless of who's in management, the past management practices were you go through the negotiation process for unions, you raise certain expectations, and then you get to your budget time and you don't pay for it. So we are, is it $15 or $18 million in the hole basically for underfunded pension, assuming 7.5%, but you change it 6.5% and it nearly doubles. So while I think we need to consider COLA increases because that's the expectation that's been laid down, going forward we need to be fair to the current town staff as well, that we don't shortchange them.
Counselor Perry and then Franco.
As we consider this in attempts to be fair, I think it would be helpful, especially since we can't consider the other income that these people have. I think it would be helpful to know what the median retirement benefit is for the average retiree in Connecticut, and the median retirement for each of for other towns in Connecticut for the similar union categories, so that we could see where we stand currently as compared to where forces are trying to lead us to. Would that be a reasonable thing to do? Could we get that, John?
We'd have to talk with, we'd either have to have staff reach out to every one of them. We could see, first of all, does CCM have any information for the medians? I'd be hesitant to use TPS just because we actually spent, it costs a lot of money every time we had them do something. What were the bills? I think it was close to, was it between 10 and 15,000 for all this earlier work? So it's pretty pricey having them do stuff. We could check with CCM, but otherwise we'd either have to spend a lot of money or spend an awful lot of staff time. And it'll take a long time if the CCM doesn't have it.
What about
We're talking several months.
What about a brief communication to several towns around us of similar
Use
size?
the immediate ones surrounding us.
Yes.
We could request.
Okay, we have Counselor Heed with a follow-up, then Franco, and then Parker.
Sorry, I set myself up to ask a question, then I didn't ask it. How could we go about, or are there options for going about and making COLA adjustments that are basically like revenue neutral? So is there a give and take process that can happen here, or do we have to look at reductions elsewhere?
We'd have to look at retirement agreements which, there are retiree agreements in place, correct? Retirement plan agreements. We'd have to ask for something. Anything would have to be negotiated outside of the non-union people, and probably be a several-month process.
What you can't do is you can't negotiate ones that are already out there. You couldn't say if we take away from the
unless
high.
they willingly we gave them something, they willingly did something.
Yeah, that would be difficult because there's nobody to negotiate with at that point. But one thing I want to add, Council Aubrey, you're making a very good point here, that you're saying that we're not communicating back. And I think you're right. I think we have to make a decision at some point to say the yes or no. Am I pretty much where you are on this, instead of just letting it kind of hang in the breeze there?
Well, it's everything that we're doing is a learning process. you know, and so you're trying to get enough information, and you're having people talk with you about their frustration with it. So yes, I think we need to have a very good process. I notice on this information that you gave us, am I speaking out of turn?
No, you're responding to his,
Oh, okay. This
there are two waiting.
information we've got here, it says since 2002. Am I reading that correct?
that's in regard to the actuarial assumptions, or no, that's the rate of returns. That doesn't have anything to do with the
No, that's
request.
not, yeah, that's just what is the plan, the retirement plan getting for return? That's what that really,
That was requested by the council to be provided to the council for this meeting. But it really has, so that's a larger different topic, really.
It's not-
This part is for another time, is that
Yes.
what you're saying?
Yes. I was told to bring that information for this discussion also.
But do we have anything since 202?
Yes, that's what the 1 year is.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
That's a
start at the
long-term
top
average
and go
since- That's
backwards.
the long-term average since 2002.
Okay,
and what
so-
they do is they employ like what they call smoothing, where they kind of take multiple years when they're figuring the actuarial. That's pretty much how that goes. So you might see a very great year, but then we know a couple of years ago, it was, I think, around the 16s, 216s.
Right.
We
If
didn't
you look
have
at the
such-
three-year average, that was the worst at 5.21%. The last year's been 8.13%. Long-term is 6.8. Looking to 6.5 is probably a good target to go to.
Counselor Franco and then Parker, and then Schmidt, I'm sorry.
So an actuary was here, from what I recall, he had said that we are one of the highest funded in our retirement accounts in the state, is that correct?
We're in the higher end.
So compared to most everybody else, we're
doing pretty well.
We're doing well in funding our fund balance.
Even better on the health. We're the third highest funded.
Okay, so from what I'm understanding, there are people that they're retired on probably a lot of them on a fixed income for the last 10 to 15 years that haven't received any kind of increase. But our staff that are that work today, they're getting increases probably almost on a yearly basis or every other year maybe. Correct?
Well, yeah, and
Well,
remember
I've heard
those
people
people.
say we also have to worry about the people that are working for the town right now, they're actual
Right,
workers.
just like when they
But
were.
the thought is, like, after you retire from our town, you shouldn't just be left out there for 10 to 15 years with no increase at all. I think that there is something in the last decade or so that's been a major breakdown that this hasn't been taken care of. I also think, from what I've heard, and I don't know exactly how true this is, the city staff, when they retire, theirs is scheduled. They get an increase on a scheduled basis. That basically, we fund that through our budget process. So, and that's just like automatic. So I don't understand why for 15 years that some people haven't received any kind of increase whatsoever. I just don't understand why.
Yeah, I can't say because I haven't been here that long, but you're
But
bringing up a good.
none of us have.
You're bringing up a
Even if we're
good.
going to give a 2%, I mean, even if we're going to go in the hole for another 1.5 million, we have to do something here. There's something that has to be done.
I was just going to mention, is it okay?
Yeah.
The city uses, I believe it's CIP, that if Julia might know better than me, I don't know if she does or not, maybe not, she's not in HR. But if it goes, if there's an increase in CIP, that triggers an increase. I think they have to be retired a certain number of years, but it does do it every year. I would not want to do something automatically triggered. I want a decision made by the council.
Right.
Because it does have an effect, but there's somewhere in between in there
But for
that we
15
can come up with for the future.
I mean,
Right.
15 years is a long time.
Right. Whatever
No
happens
increase.
here today, we'll review the process, come back, review that process with you, but also make some suggestions on how to improve that process.
Can
So-
we,
We've got 3 people waiting, so.
Which is what I was gonna recommend. I was actually gonna ask you that. So I touched on every little bit, but what concerns me is that the non-union personnel received it because they sent you a letter. So the people that were union and retired have not received it, in my understanding, in the last 15 years. So is there any way of thinking of putting this in the budget for next year or something to figure this out? I'm just throwing this idea out there, just to look into it, to see what we can do.
I just want to make sure you understand, that wasn't like a letter that came to my office and I said, wow, these guys and gals are non-union, let's pay it. It went before a vote. All of this group, all of the groups that were union and non-union were together. We did the same study for the prior town council, and they chose one particular group to give it to. They didn't give it to the rest. But we prepared the same documents, and I think the mayor probably is aware of that.
All right, now I'm even more confused. So you're telling, okay, so they brought it to the town council from the retirement board. Is that correct?
But nothing comes to the retirement board on this.
Nothing?
This is all requests from either unions or non-union people send individual requests.
It's a policy decision made by the
Yeah, I
council.
wouldn't even completely disregard the retirement board for this discussion.
Okay. Go ahead.
Should we go on?
Go ahead.
Counselor Schmidt, and then did you have your hand? I'm sorry.
I did, but I forgot.
I have to write it down.
All right, so then we'll go to Counselor Heath, and then if you get it, we'll come back to you.
I
Counselor Heath.
recall on the RTM, I don't remember how the vote went, but I recall we did vote a few years back on giving a COLA increase to non-union based on the assumption that non-union hadn't had a COLA increase in years before that. So I suspect that's the one that went through. On the city, I know that on the city council votes on COLAs. I don't know where they're funded though, so that would be something that we should check. I'm not under the impression that the town pays for the retirement.
We'll get when you pass these things, when we get the regular bill every year, it just gets incorporated into it. So
Gotcha.
general fund will end up paying
All right.
for whatever the yearly amount is.
So that being said, does it have to be 2%? Can it be 1%, 3%?
Whatever the council wishes.
And then can options be brought forward on how we can close this gap, the funding gap on our pension?
Sure. It's pay more money again.
Sure.
So I would like to see, regardless of what we do with this particular COLA, I would like to see some kind of process developed by us so that we know that every 2 years, every 3 years, whatever everybody decides, it's going to come up for a regular vote. That way we can leave it for whoever comes after us, and then it'll be there, and then they can consider again what is appropriate, and they can make that policy decision whether they want to give one or not. I don't think this is just a one and done, like just vote this and then forget about it. We need to make a decision now and then, well, not necessarily tonight, but we need to make a decision and then set a policy for how we're going to handle it in the future. Councilor Schmidt, did you want to go?
Well, I think what I was thinking of was Councilor Obrey had asked a question about the 6.8% of these figures that are here. And it was my understanding that this is the income that goes into the fund, and if that income helps us to lower the amount that we have to pay each year into the fund to keep it to a certain level.
It does.
It has nothing to do with baseball. It does have everything to do with the retirement because it's funding it. But it's just a figure that helps us to have to pay a little less than we might otherwise.
So the motion was, oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Atwater.
I guess I'd like to reiterate that I brought this up the last time. If you look at those rates of return, the best they ever did was this last year, but the average is 6.8 over the life of the program.
There was a year I know where that was like 10%. Just, there could be random years that get high.
Right, I understand that. But for the assumption to be made for all those years of a return of 8.5%, when you're not coming even close to doing that, to me is a crime. But I would also like to agree with Councilor Franco and say that this seems to have dragged down long enough and back and forth, and some people 5 years, some people 15, some union, some non-union, or whatever. I think it's time that we probably stepped up and at least did something now. And I agree with the mayor that we then follow it up with more definitive plans and guidelines as to what we do. But I think I've heard enough to say that we should do something now.
Does anyone wish to make a motion this evening, or our motion that's on the floor now is just to continue the discussion, and that's what we're doing. We're continuing the discussion. Is anyone prepared to make a motion this evening to act on a particular percent?
Could I ask a question? One
Certainly.
more question?
Yeah.
Okay, of course, I'd like to move to make this happen and the other things to happen also, but what would we tap into to get this money?
Well, you wouldn't pay it immediately. It would come through as we get billed later. So there's no immediate cost. It just comes through the normal retirement costs in the yearly budget. So it'll be the next budget process.
Okay, but will it do anything sooner than that for the people that are retired?
Oh, yeah. Bob, but you know better than me.
Yeah, we could definitely do something sooner for them, but what happens is the actuarial part would probably not hit us for like a year at best.
At worst, yeah.
I'm sorry?
The actuarial part where we'd be getting billed for this, because now we start to figure out what does it cost us, like that $65,000 would be hitting us probably like next year, because that's when the actuarial would look at us, and that's when he starts to, or he, them, they start to build based on what the arc is, what we need to contribute to keep us in line where we're supposed to be.
But the benefit would be sooner than that, would be right away.
Okay, one other question, and I promise I'll quit. This doesn't interfere with any negotiations you're doing with union groups right now?
No, it really doesn't.
Okay.
It's separate and assigned. It's.
Councilor Zepari and then Atwater.
I think, we've asked for additional information, and we don't have that yet. And I think it would be important to look at that data that we've asked for and then make our decision from the most informed position. I don't think we need to rush into something tonight. It wasn't on the agenda to be voted on tonight. It's on the agenda for information tonight. And so we're asking for additional information above what we have. And it'd probably be a good idea to get that before we rushed ahead and made a vote on this issue.
Councilor Atwater.
I just wanted to explain, I think, to Councilor Aubrey, there's sums of money that have been set aside to pay future benefits for retirement. And the $65,000 would come out of that.
Okay, well, I was listening to the mayor saying, we're going to see this increase.
Well, and then what happens is you then figure out for the future of these people that are going to live for so long and get these increases for so long, the total of that is going to equal 1.3 million or 1.7 million or something.
Well, if we go backwards for what we didn't pay them, we'll probably come out even.
No, probably.
Councilor Heed.
I'd just like to have a commitment that we put it in the budget that whatever we increase the COLA for, that we continue to pay for. So it would be an increase in taxes or an increase in this line in the budget or
We
so on
always,
and
we
so
always do
forth.
what the actuary requires, right, or recommends.
I'd still like to know what they pay.
So we have, just want to clarify.
Yeah.
So we have one councilor who's expressed the opinion that they'd like to delay this until we get the information that was requested from the manager. Councilor Franco, and then back to Aubrey.
What information are we waiting on?
I believe Councilor Zepari asked for the median retirement benefit in Connecticut and for neighboring towns, correct?
Yes.
Can I ask?
And we also, all of you don't have it, although I have it. I have the median benefits currently being paid to the respective union members. Well, John has it also, but all of you haven't received it yet. The median benefits currently being paid to the people in Groton who would receive these COLA benefits.
So Mr. Burt has that available. He already provided it for Councilor Zepari because it was his question, but he's going to forward it to the rest of us. So I don't know if that's a piece that you want to wait to read before you act.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a mechanical question?
Yes, and then Councilor Aubrey.
What we do tonight is recommendations that go to the council for vote.
Correct.
Is that correct? So if we don't make a recommendation tonight, the next meeting is a council meeting. Then the one after that is a committee of the whole, which we could then make a recommendation, which then goes into September or October or whatever. I still think we should just do something. I just am so tired of this being dragged on. Let's just do something. And if we don't vote on it in another 2 weeks, then we don't vote on it. But at least get the ball rolling.
So we have one counselor who would like to wait, another counselor who would like to act this evening. Counselor Aubrey, you wanted the floor again?
I'd like to make a motion that we make an action to make this happen tonight.
Make what happen, please?
A annual cost for 2% COLA for the retired past employees.
So-
A one-time COLA adjustment. Is
A
that correct?
one-time COLA adjustment at this point. I mean, it's ridiculous, the amount of time that this has gone on.
Okay, wait, let me clarify, make sure I have it.
Okay.
So Aubrey is moving that this council approves a 2% one-time COLA adjustment for town retirees. Is that
And-
specific enough, Mr.
Well,
Zagami, or do you need more?
I think what we're all relating to is the ones that have not gotten it in the last 5 years. That's what the study was based on.
So would you like to amend 2% one-time COLA adjustments?
With future
For-
adjustments to be negotiated in the future.
Okay, but we need to add in the part that Mr. Zagami had said regarding which retirees, correct?
Yeah,
Which
that have been
retirees?
retired for 5 years.
So one-time COLA adjustment for retirees
Over 5 years?
Who haven't
Retired.
received one in the last 5 years.
who have not received COLA in the past 5, is that what you're saying, Mr. Zagami?
Yes.
I don't know if that's right.
Okay.
I thought it was that they had to be retired 5 years before they were eligible on some of the union groups. I thought the language said I didn't think it was that they hadn't received it in 5 years. I thought it was that they had been retired at least 5 years.
Well, that's what our study proved, that they had to be retired 5 years.
Right, they have to be retired 5 years.
Would you be willing to state it clearly for me, please?
Well, what had been mentioned, or you mean the whole motion?
The whole motion.
I'd have to say, I didn't write it down as you went.
Okay, so
Wait,
what
I'll
I
write it-
have,
no, I'll write
I
it
was
down.
trying to cobble it
If we do a
together.
quick break, me and Bob can write.
Okay, we're gonna recess for 5 minutes. So we will be back at 8:29. Thank you. We have some clarity on the motion she wanted to make, so would you read that for us, please?
I'd like to make the motion, move to is that recommend?
It is recommended.
Move to recommend to grant a 2% one-time cost of living adjustment for town employees that have been retired for at least 5 years.
Is there a second?
Second.
May I have it, please? I'll have to give that to the clerk. So
It
this
is
was
a
moved
bit-
by Aubrey and seconded by Parker. Okay, so this is on the floor, now it's open for discussion. Is there discussion on the motion that is on the floor?
It's just a clarification that
Yes.
this is not the end of what we're going to be looking at. We're going to learn more about this, we're going to put some policies in place, and we're going to try to make this a better situation going forward.
Any discussion on this particular item for this evening? Counselor Franco?
So for union workers, in the last so many years, have there been increases for any of them? In like maybe the past 5 years, any of them?
No.
Okay.
But there were other people that received an increase, but it was a small number, as I understand it. So with this resolution, those people would get another COLA with this motion. Is that correct?
Yes.
Those are union or non-union?
Non-union.
Police non-union group, handful of people in there.
The police non-union group usually consists of like 3 people. That's usually the captain, the chief, and a deputy chief, or I'm not sure if there's been other positions in the past, but those are your 3 non-union police people, and that's who would receive the COLAs again.
So based on what the actuary gave us, this is a approximately $65,000 increase for the first year, but it increases our liability by $1.37 million by giving a 2%. And 1% would be a $700,000 increase, and half of that, then about $32,000. Right now, the motion's on the floor for 2%. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Heed.
By voting on the motion tonight, there is no opportunity for any give and take negotiation. It's just one and done. Is that right?
I couldn't hear.
There's no negotiation, there's no discussion on
Right.
how we go forward. It's just you vote on it and it's done.
Correct. But to negotiate something, we're talking probably, months.
All right, I just want to be clear on that.
Councilor Zepari.
A couple of things. First of all, I question, in voting on this now, we're voting on an item that has not been on the agenda for this night, and therefore has not been publicly noticed that this would be voted tonight. So there may be a question of procedure here. The second thing I just started to do some of the arithmetic on this, and looking at the median benefits for each of the groups that were voting at 2%. I know nobody wanted to look at that. It was just damn the torpedoes full speed ahead. But for instance, the non-union members are currently receiving a median benefit of $2,255 per month. Union AFS CME receive a benefit of $1,504 per month. That comes out to about $18,000 a year. CMFA receive $1,385 per month. Steel workers receive $2,019 per month currently. Police union receives median is $3,947 per month currently. And the non-union police, which we understand is the upper level, are currently receiving benefits of $5,982 per month, or $71,784 per year. Those are the people we're voting to give a 2% raise to. The reason why I wanted to see what the median retirement benefits are in the state is to see if these people are currently being adequately treated according to the standard for retirement in the state, and to see if these people are currently being adequately treated according to the standard of retirement for other town employees who have retired in neighboring communities. I don't think that's too much to ask for. Since this delay has gone on supposedly for 13 years, it wouldn't hurt to do a little bit of research and to get our numbers straight before we go ahead with it. And so that's why I'm speaking now to, not against the motion, but to delay this until we can reconsider it at another time, after we have full data.
Councilor Aubrey and then Parker.
When you put a number out like that, I don't think everybody in that department gets that same amount. I think there would be all kinds of different payouts by their position, their income at the time, their length of service. Are you going to break it down for every part of that?
No, what we did was, I understand that we cannot consider the high, the low. We have to look at it by the mean. But I can give you, John did give me the numbers before, if I can get my phone to light up again.
But
I understand by taking my position, by the way, I'm not enhancing the votes I'm going to get in the next election. But I'm trying to do the right thing for the town and the fair thing to the town and to the people who are seeking.
Councilor Aubrey had the floor. Did you want to say anything else?
No, she asked me about it. She asked me a question in particular.
She should be directing it to the whole body, not to a particular councilor, so as not to cause argument.
No, we're not really arguing. Again, it's information. But I think that the people that are affected by what's happening tonight are probably nowhere near in their amount that they get for their retirement as the people would be today. And I don't think that the comparison is needed because it's apples and oranges. And I think that we've ignored these people long enough, and I think that we should move forward. And I said with that, do our research, find out if things are being done correctly. I mean, there are some situations where people pump up their income the last few years that they're working, and they end up with an entirely different retirement than maybe the guy beside them. There's a lot to look at. But for right now, we have a group of people that have been ignored. And I feel this is a very fair thing to do, to move forward on this and then educate ourselves more and find out if all over it's being done correctly.
Counselor Parker.
I hear there's a concern about negotiations, so if we do it this way tonight, can we change the motion to include, to proceed further for negotiations later on down the road? I mean, I know this is only a one-time deal, correct?
Right, I wouldn't include anything like that in this motion, so
Or
because it would
can,
muddy it,
but could I make a
we-
recommendation?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
I was going to make an amendment to this, but if you prefer not, the amendment was going to be, and that awarding of COLAs will be reviewed by the town council every 2 years. Would you prefer it be separate from the COLA
But,
amendment?
it'd be nice to have some flexibility so we can bring the process to you and then make some recommendations. You can think about it, whether
So
it's
keep
2
them
years or
separate?
3 years or 1 year, yeah.
Okay. Does that address your concern?
Yes.
Okay. Counselor Heath?
Specifically, I've sort of indicated that there are things we can talk about. One of these things that I think we should talk about is moving retirees from the town health insurance program to Medicare like everybody else. So that's one of the things that I think should be on the agenda going forward.
That is a retirement board thing, is it not? Or is
No,
that
that's
an
no, that's
individual
through
negotiation?
agreements. And I think at 65, they take, our town employees are taking the Medicare, but there's some supplementals we pay for. Is that right, Bob?
Yeah, it depends on, there's a myriad of multiple, we're doing a study on that right now, how many different insurance deals that were given out through the
And
years.
there's
There
different
are some
contracts for signing,
people,
there's a million, there's lots of different versions out there.
some people pay nothing, some people pot, so we're mapping them all out. We've been on this for about almost 3 weeks now, so I'm almost near the end of it. But what happens is when you're at 65, Anthem sends us the information, and that's when we have the people put on the Medicare.
I understand where you're going with it, though. We'll have more discussions on that. We've been
But-
talking about some of that internally.
Moving forward with this doesn't affect that.
Anyone else who hasn't spoken wish to speak on the motion that's on the floor?
I think we need a
Counselor Schmidt.
workshop. I think you're right.
Are you raising your hand to speak again? Has anyone who hasn't spoken wish to speak? Okay, back to you, Counselor Zepari.
I just want to point out, and we seem to forget as we're voting on a lot of things, whenever we vote to spend money for one thing or to give money to a group of people, we're taking money from other people. It's not, oh, there's lots of money lying around, we can give it to them. But whenever we spend and whenever we make such a grant, we are taking money away from the taxpayers. And they have to foot the bill. And I think we have to give that consideration. And as we're considering this now, before we have really analyzed the numbers of where these people are that we're trying to help, I think we're going ahead into uncharted waters, and just because we're tired of thinking about it, and it's been a long time.
Counselor Franco.
I believe that if somebody sat for 15 years without an increase of living and on a fixed income, while the whole world increased their prices, after they worked for a town for like 27 to 30 years, we've done wrong by them. And even if we have to take from somewhere else in the town, which I don't really understand where we're going to take from somewhere else in the town, because it's currently going to be funded by the retirement fund.
Yeah,
The money's going to come right out of there.
Funded?
And then we're going to have to put some money back in there. I get it.
Yeah.
But you can't just ignore people after they've given basically
No.
a lifetime of work to you and then just let them sit there for 15 years without any kind of cost of living increase.
I think that
Well-
a lot, for instance, when someone is getting a benefit of
Counselor Franco has the floor.
$71,000, you have to
Counselor
give
Franco,
that
were you
some
finished?
credit. Do they need a 2% increase?
Counselor Zepari, Counselor Franco has the floor. Were you finished?
I think we have to give the increase, and I think all the procedural things should come later. We should fix this so that in the future, there is some kind of procedure that is followed, that it's not just up to other councils in the future to just sit there and say, yeah, maybe bring it back next month or 3 months from now. I think there should be procedures, there should be answers, there should be numbers at a specific time, and they should be analyzed and discussed.
I was going to go to Councilor Atwater unless Councilor Baumgartner, I think you haven't spoken yet. You're good? Councilor Atwater.
I move the question.
Second.
Are
Give
we
me a
in a
second.
council meeting or a committee of the whole?
We're in Cow.
You cannot move the question in committee of the whole.
Thank you. Rules Chair.
Rules Committee.
Rules. So I think we have established our positions, and I think people are pretty entrenched in their positions at this point, so I'm ready to call for a vote. So the motion is to recommend or to grant a 2% one-time cost of living adjustment for town employees that have been retired for at least 5 years. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed by Zip Perry. Abstentions? Okay, so that passed 8 to 1 to 0. And at this point, I'd like to make a motion that the awarding of COLAs will be reviewed by the town council every 2 years.
Second.
Moved by Granatowski, seconded by Parker. And this would not preclude us from adjusting this. If you wanted to change it when we get to the town council meeting, we could always adjust at that point. Is there any discussion on the second motion? Councilor Franco.
Just as a curiosity, is this in addition to our agenda for tonight? Which wasn't posted?
This is still the continuation of, the agenda item is calling for the cost of living adjustment for retirees, and the motion just said council will continue discussion on this item.
And
Just give me a second. You can talk while I'm writing if you don't mind.
how, I would like to approve this, but I would also like to have a procedural, how we're going to deal with fixing it and finding procedures. Who is going to take the lead on that?
Would you like to amend my motion?
I want that question answered then. Who's going to take the lead on
That's up to
writing up
us.
procedures?
Yeah, we'll
and
come
bringing
back
in
with you with some, yeah, staff will.
staff?
So is your preference to hold off on the second part? I just don't want it to get lost. I want to have something in place for the future, so.
I mean, I don't think 2 years is unreasonable, so we can work, if that's what the council wishes, we'll just work around that. Either way is fine with me. Bob, do you have a?
Well, here's my thought, is that the contract speaks to how often, they're all different, but how often you should review it. Doesn't mean
As a minimum, right.
Doesn't, as a minimum, doesn't mean you can't do better.
Right.
But if you want, it's not really a procedure at that point that we
It
can
might be
put-
better if we
You can always do
review all the
better,
contracts, though.
you just can't go backwards,
But
but,
as a procedure for the council to review whatever is open at that time.
right, that makes sense. But I think if I came back with the information for all of the contracts, what each individual one says to that, I think
No, I
that'd
understand.
give you better information, but you can always do better than what the contract calls for.
You can always change it later too, you know, you can do 2 years now, you can make it a change later. You're not stuck with 2 years forever.
Should we wait for the procedures to come to us and have it in there before we vote on anything?
Are you asking staff to write procedures?
Well, that's why I said, who's going to take the lead
Yeah,
on
we
writing
will.
this?
Staff will be.
They'll write it, we'll review and correct and change if we need to.
So you want to hold off on this? What's your pleasure?
I'd rather hold off.
Yes?
We'll make this a high priority, we'll get something to you quickly.
So I withdraw my second,
And I will withdraw the motion
but can I
with
make a
the, with the
recommendation?
caveat that you put this back on so it doesn't get lost, please.
Yes.
Thank you. So next cow, we want to have this discussion again about
It might
the
be
future
second-
process.
It might be the second cow.
That's right. We're going to be kind of busy, huh? Yeah, we're going to be kind of busy. Okay, so Counselor Parker withdrew her second, and I withdrew my motion. So a lot of chattering. Okay. All right, so we're set on that, so back to the agenda. So we are on to 5G 2018-80, and this was, I think this is Counselor Parker, correct? And this is on page 50.
Okay. Are we doing the public? Okay.
We don't have a date for the public hearing, but I think you could just start off with the beginning of it and just say a future date maybe.
Okay. I make a motion to introduce the ethics ordinance and schedule a public hearing on a future date set.
Is that acceptable, Mr. Burt?
Yes.
Moved by Parker, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Atwater. And Mr. Burt passed out a revised ordinance for the Code of Ethics. Everyone should have one at their place. We don't have the date set yet.
For the one
Yes.
that was here?
Let me find, yes, that's the one. And I'm trying to remember, it was 5. The change, well, if you open it up, I think he has it struck, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you open to page 4 of 8, you can see the language that was stricken, and the new language. And then on page 6, item C has been struck as well. So we are moving the ordinance as given to us this evening in the hard copy.
Okay.
Is everybody clear on what we're doing?
Yes.
Okay. And the reason why I think it's important is because I think we should have an ethics commission appointed that exists because it's in the charter. God bless you.
Thank you.
The charter tells us we need to have an ethics commission established, and we should not just wait and when there's a problem, then we start an ethics commission. So Mr. Burt fixed the language there for us and deleted the other language that would be in conflict with it. So those are the only things that are different here. Is there any discussion on the rest of the ordinance? If we're all comfortable with the changes, then we can go on to the discussion of the individual concerns. Councilor Perry.
The only thing I'm concerned about is on page 7 of 8, hearings. And in this page, hearings shall not be subject to rules of court or evidence. Now, the hearings need not be subject to rules of court, but rules of evidence have been carefully developed so that the evidence that's presented in a hearing is reliable. If we start short-circuiting that so that we accept less than reliable evidence or have less stringent requirements, then we're opening up for more of, we're opening this up for injustice because the evidence may be tainted.
I would encourage, if we read further in that sentence, it says, accept all applicable rights under the United States and Connecticut constitutions. So you're not being denied any rights that are found in either the Connecticut Constitution or the United States Constitution. You still have those protections.
It still doesn't include, as I say, there are things that you can bring into evidence and ways to bring them in that have to be relevant. One of the things that would not be contrary to the Constitution is to accuse someone of an ethical violation in terms of accepting finances, accepting a financial gain from something he voted on in the council. And in the course of the hearing, it's brought out before the hearing officers that the individual is a philanderer, and he's had several extramarital affairs, and those things would not be allowed under rules of evidence because they're not relevant. And you're not accusing the person of having extramarital affairs in this ethical hearing. You're accusing him of having a financial interest or a conflict of interest in something that he has participated in. That's just one example of rules of evidence. I can't go through all of them for you, but I think when we get to the point of tearing apart someone's reputation by having a hearing accusing an individual of dishonest dealings as far as his representation on the council, then we should be sure that what we're doing is for the proper reasons. So the only thing I would like to see is to remove the part that prohibits the use of the rules of evidence. And as I said, they're carefully studied, they've been developed over years, and the whole purpose of them is to prevent misleading evidence or irrelevant evidence.
Councilor Parker.
Just a quick question. Our attorneys reviewed this?
Yes, they did.
Would it be a problem to go back and ask them about that?
No, I mean, I could have the change if they say it's appropriate to remove, I could have that change just for when it comes to the council.
And then that would be ready.
Yeah.
So, Councilor Zepari, could you specify for Mr. Burt what line you would like stricken, please?
Or evidence.
I would, let me just see, I have a hard time finding it again.
You were on page 7G.
Yeah, third sentence down, I think he wants to strike the or evidence after rules of court.
The third sentence down. I don't care, it should not be subject to the rules of court, and I would strike out or evidence.
So all you're looking for is those two words to be taken out?
Yes, and I would say and, instead of except, and all applicable rights under the United States and Connecticut Constitution, etc.
Okay, so Mr. Burt will take that to the town attorney for consideration. That way, when we come back to vote on this at our council meeting, we'll have an answer about whether it's appropriate to strike those or not. Any further discussion on this? I have a couple of things. Yes, Councilor Atwater.
If I understand Councilor Zepari correctly, he's saying hearings, it would then read, hearings shall not be subject to rules of court and all applicable rights under the United States.
That's correct. You're right.
And I don't think that's what you're trying to say.
That's not what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
So then would you like to adjust what you are trying to say?
All right, sure. If you want me to do it from a hearing shall not be subject to the rules of court, period. The rules of evidence shall apply and all rights under the accused, under the United States and Connecticut constitutions, etc., should be included.
Okay, let me read that. So you want, on page 7G, the second sentence, hearings shall not be subject to rules of court, period. The rules of evidence and all applicable rights under the United States and Connecticut constitutions, including without limitation the rights, yada, yada, yada.
Shall apply.
Shall apply.
Got it.
You got it? Okay. Does anyone else have anything? Because I had a couple of questions. We're on page 3, under conflict of interest.
Under the current one? Or the,
I don't think it changed. So I'm looking at 2A and 2B. And I know people have raised issues with budget votes. So does provision B take care of that question that people raise frequently? So for example, if someone's spouse works for the town and they vote at the RTM for the whole budget for the town, I've heard people complain in the past, even though, does B cover that issue?
I think so, but I'll double check with the attorney.
Okay. We've got that one. That's good. Well, that's all I had. Was the other things addressed? Any other questions or comments? Yes, Councilor Franco. Are we hearing music?
That's what I was
People
thinking.
outside talking.
People, oh, okay.
Okay, so as Joe had mentioned about the evidence and people coming up with things that may not pertain to an ethical violation, I recall reading through this, and there was something that had stated specifically, evidence had to pertain to the issue at hand. It could not be other evidence, and I'm having a hard time finding it. right at this moment, but I remember reading it because it crossed my mind that other people may bring up things that they shouldn't.
I thought there was two, but I'm blanking on where it is. It's been a while
It's
since.
somewhere in here. I know on page 5 of 8, under complaints on the second paragraph, it does say something about complaints of violation of the Code of Ethics must relate to a financial gain or financial interests which are not in the best interest of the town of Groton. But I'm having a hard time finding it, but I do recall reading it already.
Right
So
after that.
All right,
And included in the complaint shall be the name of the person accused and also specific acts alleged to constitute the violation of section 4. Is that what you're referring to?
yeah, but there
So
was
you have
something
to detail-
specifically said, you cannot bring other evidence in that doesn't pertain to,
Well, the rest of, finish that paragraph. I don't know
yeah,
if
I'm
that's
trying to
what
read it
you're
really
looking for.
quick.
I'm reassured that it has to go through the town attorney.
And it also
first.
says, all information supplied to or received by the town attorney and/or commission during evaluation and investigation remain confidential. I would have to reread this again, but there was something specific in there, so I don't know if we should cross out anything, because there was specifically stated it had to pertain to the ethic violation, and you couldn't have other evidence of other things. Do you recall reading that?
If I may respond to what you're saying, even if that is so, there are other rules of evidence, for instance, on documents that are produced. Documents have to be authentic. And if you produce a document in evidence, it has to be an authentic document, and there are ways of authenticating it. Otherwise, evidence can be fabricated. And you have to be very careful about this. And the other thing is we're in a political environment where people may be eager to dispose of someone or discredit someone because of political affiliation. We want to be careful that when we take an action against someone, when we dishonor someone, we have all our ducks in a row properly. And as I said, the rules of evidence have been developed over a long time for just that purpose, to prevent the political maneuvering and attack on people in legal proceedings.
Councilor Franco, if you look on page 6, is it 2B you were looking at? If the town attorney determines that the complaint is in proper form and the allegations, if true, would constitute a violation of this code? It seems like there's a lot of protections in here as far as just the fact that it has to start with the town attorney. And it doesn't progress unless they feel that it's a valid violation.
Right.
So
And
you're having someone who's trained legally look at it initially.
And I do recall that, well, as I read this, there were specific things stating that things have to be actual and they have to be truthful, and there were issues. One of the questions that I have is on page 2 of 8, where it's basically coming down to the root of it all, is like a probable cause, where it states in here, the belief should be more than a mere suspicion, but less than proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And this is where it becomes more sticky, where I think some people may, in their mind, think it's an ethical violation, but somebody else may not think so. And this is where things become muddy.
And that's why I wanted the attorney review, because I've heard people say things are ethical violations and they're really not.
Right. And as I read this and I went further into it, I did agree that the things that were in here would cover people from putting in false statements. And there was also, it can't just be somebody just says, hey, I saw what you did, you voted on that, but in their mind, there's an ethical violation, but in reality, there's nothing there.
Mr. Burton?
I was just gonna say, a lot of time was spent on this, trying to think through all those type of things.
And I think the fact that, my big problem was the fact that there wasn't going to be anybody on this committee until someone raised a complaint. And then that would lend itself to more of what Councilor Zapiri was fearing. Whereas if we seat an ethics commission now, you're going to have people on there that, have no particular stake or tie to anything. And I think you're better off going that way with it. That way you pick fair people, a balanced group of people that are ready if anything does occur.
May I
yes.
ask how exactly they'll be chosen?
The council chooses, I think, according to this, correct?
Correct.
It does say that, but I'm like, how will we, are these people that are going to apply? Are they going to?
Yeah, I would think they'd apply and go through the personnel committee.
Okay.
There's a description of people of who is eligible or ineligible.
Right. But
Section
they will
5,
apply.
Page number 2.
So do
page
they,
4.
they'll apply to the DTC or the RTC or as an independent? I mean, is that how it's going to happen?
I believe it would be handled the same way any other commission would be, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So what we're asking tonight, then, what is on the floor, is to introduce the ordinance and schedule a public hearing for it at a date to be determined by the manager, and he will come back to us with our questions answered at the council meeting. That way, if we need to adjust it, we can.
Okay.
Are we prepared to vote? Okay, all those in favor of introducing the ethics ordinance and scheduling a public hearing at a date to be determined, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? So moved unanimously. Okay. That gets us to department reorganization on page 59, and I don't know, oh yeah, there is a motion that needs to be made. Are we at Councilor Heed?
No.
Councilor Franco?
I make a motion to recommend a resolution to approve the change of the administrative secretary position to the executive assistant position at a savings of approximately $62,000 per year plus benefits.
Second. Moved by Franco and seconded by Parker. Mr. Burt, would you like to address us?
Sure. As you all know, the assistant to the administrator retired last week. That leaves Lisa in the department, who I'm looking to upgrade because she'll be taking on more responsibilities without Nikki here. Nikki's was a much higher, it was a couple steps up higher position. I'm not looking to fill a body, so I'll go with one person instead of two. Ideally, my plan was I'd like to have moved human services or human resources up to our department from the ground floor so that Mr. Zagami and I could share a clerical person to help out. HR, though, has more requirements for real walls, not cubicles. There's a lot more to it to put them up there. So we're talking of a cost of approximately $100,000 to move them for all the physical changes. So I can't, in good conscience, ask for $100,000 to do that. There'll be a lot of times people won't be able to walk if Lisa's out at lunch. If she's on vacation, like right now, she's on vacation until next Wednesday. I've got calls forwarded down, though, to Christine and Bob's office, so calls are being forwarded to the main line. But if somebody walks in, he tries to walk in, and I'm in a meeting, which is much of the time, they won't be able to find someone. With the RB, there'll be a sign up saying, leave a message here, or else you can go down to HR, for help. But one way or another, we need to do something with Lisa's position. She will be taking on higher duties. So.
Are there questions about this particular item? Councilor Atwater?
Could we move Mr. Byrd downstairs?
There's not room.
I don't think there's room.
Yeah.
Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of the motion to approve the change of administrative secretary to executive assistant at a savings of approximately $62,000, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So moved unanimously. 5I, Beautification Committee on page 61. Councilor Heed.
I'll make a motion to recommend a resolution establishing a beautification committee. I so move.
Second.
Moved by Heed and seconded by Franco. And Councilor Franco, would you like to tell us about your vision for the Beautification Committee, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
This is something Leanne and I have been working on together. And ever since the Quantic Village meeting down at the library, I have been thinking, and I've discussed this with Leanne, on ways that we can improve our town. We can add color and beauty. We can clean it up, possibly add artwork, and do this throughout our town on a volunteer basis and at no cost to the town. We foresee the committee to do fundraising and apply for grants and use volunteers and try and keep all the maintenance as to whatever the beautification is within our committee, so it wouldn't have a strain on any kind of town staff. And we're looking to for people to join the 5 members that will be appointed. and we're looking for volunteers who would like to help on many different levels.
We have an eager one in the audience, by the way.
So the proposal, it was in the request here, and I think the pertinent things are that no staff members will be assigned, minutes will be kept in accordance to Freedom of Information Act, and it's going to be all volunteers.
Right.
Is the goal.
That's the goal.
Does anyone, or Councilor Aubrey, would you like to address it as well?
The only other thing I'd like to say is we hope to ask the businesses in the area that we hope to be working in to become part of it, because it will improve the front of their buildings and kind of add a little excitement. Did you mention where we hope to begin?
Well, I didn't say where we were going to be beginning, but.
Oh, we'll keep it a secret.
It'll be a surprise.
Yeah.
Councilor Baumgartner.
Well, perhaps on approval of these, of this ordinance, we can implore the new beautification committee to work on the entrance of the town hall. So I know that was brought up this evening. So hope I didn't,
Just to mention, I think everything that was on the list is being done. Mulch is already out there. If you look, we've redone the safety striping, and we're getting ready to do some other painting and things there. So.
I spoke too soon.
And I will mention too that I did a search of other towns. I was surprised how many have beautification committees. It's very, very common in Connecticut.
Councilor Heath.
One comment or a suggestion, observation, something. In the past, when I've noticed beautification committees doing work, they don't always go back to check on what they did. So, it gets really run down, ratty, sort of weeds grow up. So it might be a good, a standard to just review the spots that you've improved.
Correct, and that goes along with the maintenance.
Oh, gotcha.
Gotcha. Don't worry about it.
Well, that's why it's important to have the businesses involved, because a lot of the maintenance will come back to them. But I'm sure it will not. We'll do it in a way that it won't be too cumbersome a situation. Paige from EDC, Paige Bronx, has suggested that we get a sister city in Holland, and we could start doing tulips.
We
Lord
had
knows
Holland.
what's going to come out of this.
We had Holland, Michigan. That was a sister city of Holland, and they have a big tulip festival every year.
I'm sorry, it
It
was
draws a
you
huge
that
number of
said that,
people
not
in.
Paige.
Yeah.
And I thought if we got a sister city, maybe they'd send us the bulbs.
I do think that to echo Councilor Heed, the maintenance of it is important, and there's, I think the way that the downtown Mystic Merchants handle things, they all kind of pitch in together, and they work as a group, and to keep it looking good for everybody in town, so.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're hoping to work in areas at a time.
Correct.
At least that's my goal,
Great.
as I foresee it.
Bannery Man, one of them.
Okay. Are we prepared to vote on recommending a resolution establishing a beautification committee? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, so moved unanimously. And that leaves us to review of agenda items. Is there anything else, Mr. Burt, you needed to?
Nothing for me.
Nothing? Any other business?
I do.
Counselor, we have a lot of other business. Okay, so Atwater, Aubrey, Franco.
I just wanted to mention a letter that was sent out by Gary Schneider on the resurfacing of the High Street. And the letter is dated July 19th, and the work started on July 23rd. And I thought anybody who went away on Friday for the weekend might come home on late Monday and find out that his roadway is completely messed up. And I just wondered if in the future a notice could be sent out earlier than the day before.
I'll mention that.
I think they did that a while back, didn't they? The asphalt's been down for quite a while.
Counselor Aubrey.
Just two things I'd like to follow up on. I'd like an updated schedule, if possible, for Par 4 improvements. And looking forward to a tour of Fitch so that we can understand what some of the proposals might be that'll come through.
Fitch Middle.
Right.
Fitch Middle. I think they just call it Fitch now,
Yeah,
don't
they
they?
do, but I was thinking of the high school.
Yeah.
and Counselor Franco.
I failed to mention during communications that I received a notification, and I believe Juliet did as well, from Ms. Foley, who reached out to us, and I have not been able to call her back, but I really plan to. I'm so sorry. I did talk to her. Very sweet, and she did invite us to go down and sit with her by the water, so we should take her up on her offer and learn some history from her.
I visited with Ms. Foley, and I brought back her concerns to Mr. Burt, and he's already working on them. We already have some answers. I didn't get a chance to call her back, but Mr. Burt is actively responding to her concerns.
And I also spent a couple hours with her and
Okay.
helping with some drainage issues there.
Okay. I also received communication from Gretchen Chipperini, and I would also like to get some information on what's going on with the oral school.
I can, if you want me to,
Let's have Mr. Burt update, that way.
Well, I haven't had an update. I know they're down to 2 people and they're still interviewing. And a lot of it's trying to get state people in because it's their property to be there for the interviews. I think there was a little delay, but Leanne's on the committee.
Down to 2 different options, is that what you're saying?
2 proposals.
So the council doesn't vote on which one we want?
No.
Is that what you're saying? Because that's,
No.
I had understood.
well, I'm part of the committee that's doing the review, and we are down to 2 people that seem to be really looking to do the type of things that we think are good. Unfortunately, one of the state people that we would have to have at the meeting had a leave of absence, and she's now back now.
Okay.
And so I would expect in probably the next 2 weeks, we'll probably have another meeting where we're going to do what I call the dig deep. We're going to look into the backgrounds of these people, and it's moving, and it's hard because it's, it's time that goes by, but it's definitely being worked on.
Okay, thank you.
I just added, it's a state process, not a town process.
Okay.
So that's why it doesn't come through the town proper. It's really a state committee that's formed to do it.
All right, understood then. I must have been confused, that's okay.
Counselor Baumgartner.
I know there are road improvements taking place on Crystal Lake Road and Route 12, state project, and
Right.
just looking to see progress and exactly the work they're doing.
Give me 1 second here. And it's town money, but the state's doing it. The last I had last week was the Groton Utilities installed all their lines on the new poles on Crystal Lake Road. Power had been shifted over, street lights installed, and old facilities removed. Comcast relocated their lines to the new poles there. Thames Valley Communications has relocated their lines on new poles. Rocky Mountain's next, and will start their work on, it was supposed to start July 19th, I don't know if it has or not, but there's no time frame given for their work, but that was Frontier is the last to relocate and be scheduled once Rocky Mountain's complete. So Rocky Mountain's doing it now, and then Frontier. But the target date for reclaiming, their target to meet the date scheduled for reclaiming is August 12th, and so far appears to be on schedule. So.
And does the project, just a clarifying question, include sort of a shared bicycle path with a sidewalk, or I wasn't sure how that was structured. I know there's been an effort to.
Yeah, I know there's a multi-use path, but I don't know what the details are of that. I can find out more on it. But there's a path on one side of the road.
And that is all.
And thank you to Public Works. Thomas Road is progressing nicely with the 2 paths on either side. And I saw 7 people today. Walking safely, walking, jogging. You know what we forgot to mention was the AvCrat, TASM G. Those people, they go out for their runs in the morning, and they were using it all this morning in their uniform shirts, so it's good.
Yeah, I drive there every day. There's tons of people.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're safe now.
We need to check with Joe to see what his count is up to.
All right.
Joe, what is your Thomas Road count up to now?
My what?
Your Thomas Road count.
Honestly, I've seen since the road has been widened, I've seen more people. I've seen more bicyclists on the road.
Okay.
I've seen about 6 since the road's been widened and lined, which is much more than I had seen before. And that's with riding up and down that road at least once a day, usually twice a day or more.
Okay. Just
varying
checking in.
times. Yeah, I'm sure you're
Getting the
concerned.
count.
I'm sure you're concerned.
We're getting your count. You always give us a count.
Counselor Heed.
I've been reading in the paper that the Stonington, is it the borough of Stonington, the village of Stonington? They have a task force to look into a plastic ordinance. And I walk around Groton, walk around the parking lot at the Mystic Merit, I walk around my neighborhood. I pick up an excessive amount of plastic cups, straws, styrofoam cups, mostly from convenience stores and to-go restaurants, not like takeout containers, just cups and straws. And I was wondering if I make a referral, would it go to the Conservation Committee, or would we want to set up a task force, or how would you go about it?
It'd be up to the council which way you want to do it. You know, it could be a good project for the Conservation Committee, but it could also be set up as just an ad hoc committee by the mayor.
What is your vision? Is it something you feel that the Conservation Committee could tackle?
I'm not sure.
We could ask their opinion, see if they're interested in tackling
All
it.
right, why don't we ask them, and if not, we'll do an ad hoc committee.
Sounds like a beautification committee to me.
What, picking up straws?
Mr. Burt did a lot of research on, when you first mentioned this, a lot of research on the issue of the plastic bags versus the paper bags and the energy use and the disposal. And so he has a lot of ready-made information that he could share with everybody as far as the bags go. The other items, though, probably should be looked into. So I think that's a great idea to send it to them and see if they're
Plastic bags,
interested.
I almost never see a plastic bag. It's always cups and straws.
They're up in the trees. They blow and they get stuck in the trees and stuff.
'Cause I'm always looking for one.
All right, anything else?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved by Parker, seconded by Baumgartner. All those in favor of adjournment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? So moved unanimously. We are adjourned at 9:23.